Call to order joint meeting North Smithfield Town Council and Municipal Building Review Task Force, October 2nd, 2023. Madam Clerk, can you start us in the prayer and the pledge, please?
Thank you for bringing us together today in a spirit of generosity. May we honor one another by keeping an open mind. May we voice our truth and listen with an open heart. May we discern your will to unite in fruitful outcome. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do you want me to do roll call?
North Smithfield Municipal Building Review Task Force is called to order. Roll call: Terry Bartamioli. Here. David Chamberlain. Here. John Perry. Here. Paul Nordstrom. And the chair is here. Madam President, do you want to take that one issue on the new business?
I have to do roll call.
Huh?
I have to do roll call.
Okay.
Joanne, roll call, please.
Mr. Beauregard?
Here.
Ms. Hamilton?
Here.
Mrs. O'Hara? Here. Mr. Ogier? Ms. Alves?
Here. And can I just put on the record that Mr. Ogier is traveling for business? Go ahead.
Do you want to take that one item under new business, the abatement, the testing for asbestos abatement with Fuss and O'Neill? Do you want to take that first before we do the public presentation?
Okay. New business discussion, vote, or other action regarding proposal for contract administration and testing for asbestos abatement at police station for immediate repairs from Tecton and Fuss and O'Neill.
So you do have the paperwork that they submitted. It's a requirement of EPA and the Department of Health that we have this testing and reporting done. So it's not something that we cannot do. Fuss and O'Neill is the one that actually did the report, the asbestos abatement report, so they would be the person to continue to do the testing. And this would be an amendment to the existing contract with Tecton in the amount of $11,300, not to exceed.
Yeah.
So this is just, well, not just, but a monitoring of the project as it goes through? Is that basically what we're looking at here? So the removal of the asbestos will be done under their tutelage?
They're going to make sure that the asbestos is removed, that the testing, that it's meeting the testing requirements, and submitting all the documentation of the Department of Health and Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay, and why do we get this now? Is it something that came up suddenly, or, you know, should that have not been included in the original contract?
That's not.
Do you want to?
So we had started out trying to work with an abatement consultant that had done previous work on the building, and after repeated inquiries, we never got a return phone call. So in order to get the project moving, we contacted Fuss and O'Neill to do the paperwork to get us moving on the project, and to do testing to identify the abatement. They did not include at that time the construction administration services, although we knew that should the project go forward and once the scope was determined, it would be required. At that time, they would have been guessing what the scope was. So when we got the approval from the state, that's when we requested them to put a fee proposal together for the monitoring services.
And the other company, have we terminated our relationship with them?
They haven't done work for the town in quite some time and had never been a part of this process. They had done the work years and years ago. I'm not sure exactly how many years ago.
Oh, so I misunderstood then. I thought you said we started with another company and then they didn't provide us with anything, so we went with, no?
No, the town had originally had Emory, this is back in 2016, they had Emory doing it. We can't get contact with Emory.
Okay.
We've tried, Tecton has tried. And so back in January, if you remember, in January, we went forward with Fuss and O'Neill to do the asbestos abatement plan.
Right.
Mr. Vadney, at that time, you said they wouldn't get back to us. But when the trust got into this because of the condition, didn't we have to monitor that closely and so that the police can even stay in that building?
Well, it has nothing really to do with the trust. It has to do with the Department of Health, who authorized and signed off on our abatement plan, and the EPA. Both of them have requirements to have testing and monitoring done. So it's not something we can say, no, we don't want to do. It just makes sense to have Fuss and O'Neill do it. They're the ones that did the plan, so have them follow through on it.
But the trust is following everything done for the safety
Yes.
of the police at this time?
Yes.
And that is why ultimately the monitoring is essential. As they're doing abatement, obviously you're cutting into materials that have asbestos, and it needs to be done in a workmanlike and professional manner, and so that it doesn't increase hazard to any of the occupants of the building. It is in a containment, and containment means that they're sealing off that portion of the building, but there are still thresholds that have to be maintained during the work.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any more questions?
I just have a quick question, the length of time of the contract? Is there any specificity for contract expiration or?
The fee was based upon the contractor's anticipated duration of the abatement. Was it? So it's 2 months? 2 months.
Okay. And another question, sorry, but I'm just trying to protect everyone. So if it goes further, will there be an amendment to this? Or are we thinking that once that process of abatement remediation has been completed, that will be the termination of this contract as well?
The price is a not to exceed based on the scope that's anticipated and the time the contractor has outlined for that. If there were some unforeseen, which we don't anticipate, we've seen a lot of that building already, that could create an additional service. But again, we've seen so much of what's in there already. I don't anticipate an extension or an additional unforeseen.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept the limited asbestos-containing materials consulting services of Fuss and O'Neill for a not-to-exceed amount of $11,300.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Biragad.
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Hara.
Yes.
Ms. Alves.
Yes.
Could you authorize the administrator to sign that?
And
Please.
authorize the administrator to sign the contract.
Do you need a roll call on that?
Go ahead.
Can it, someone second?
1 second.
Roll call, please.
This is to let the administrator sign.
Mr. Biragad.
Yes.
Ms. Hamilton.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Hara.
Yes.
Ms. Alves.
Yes.
You want to begin, you want to do like we did at the last forum there?
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be great.
So, good evening, and members of the council, residents who have taken the time to be here tonight. Let me begin introducing the members of the Municipal Building Review Task Force. On my left, your right, would be John Perry, David Chamberlain, Paul Nordstrom, Terry Bonamioli, and my name is Paul Vadney. Let me recap how we got to this point for those that do not know. In the fall of 2020, the task force met with the town council to discuss the repairs to the police station with the funds that remained in the bond after the town hall project was completed. After discussion, the council voted to have the task force do a study to see the difference in the cost to build a new police station versus the cost to bring the current building up to code and in line with police standards today. An RFQ entitled Police Department Renovation or Replacement Analysis was approved by the town and advertised in early November 2020. 3 packages were received. A review committee made up of Police Chief Lafferty, former Town Administrator Izowski, and members Paul Nordstrom and David Chamberlain reviewed the submittals independently. Tecton Architects of Hartford was ultimately selected. They're here tonight to present a review of the need and an outline of the details of the project. Representing Tecton is Principal Jeff McElravy and Project Manager Rebecca Hopkins. And so I'll turn it over to them to do they have a nice slideshow presentation to do.
Good evening. So we're going to try to keep this as succinct as possible so we have time for questions, but it is quite a comprehensive review, so we do want to be thorough in sharing the evaluation and the process that we've gone through with the department and the task force. So the overall charge of the task force, as Paul kind of just outlined, was a thorough evaluation of deficiencies throughout the existing building and site, establishing the projected space needs for the department. We'll dive a little bit into that process. Evaluate the suitability of using that site for a new facility and or addition renovation, preparing conceptual designs, and then ultimately looking at cost for each of those options. So this is a capturing of that team. I did want to dive a little bit further into the design professionals. Jeff and I are here, but there is a much larger team that we work with, not only internally to our firm, but there are many consulting engineers that we leverage during this process, and we have done multiple public safety, police-specific projects with them, so there is a high level of familiarity for this building typology and also with some of the challenges and opportunities that we look for. So it is a much larger team. That includes CES, which is our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection engineer, Fuss & O'Neill is our civil engineer, and Johnson Structural is our structural engineer. Our team has done well over 300 plus public safety projects specifically, and Jeff brings over 35 years of experience in that market. So from a timeline of progress standpoint, I'm going to zoom ahead a little bit because Paul just captured everything leading up to us being hired, but what have we done since then? So we were hired in 2021, at which point we began meeting with the department and reviewing the space needs. So we did what we call programming exercise, but really determining each space and the potential square footage of that space. We looked at the site. We did multiple site test fits. We went through multiple conceptual design options, and then we estimated each of those. And that included a new construction and an addition renovation scheme. After which, or during that same period, we were doing building evaluations. So we were assessing all of the deficiencies within the current facility, and we completed a comprehensive report kind of documenting all of that process. After which, a letter was received from the trust specifically asking the town to address immediate concerns. So we were hired for those immediate repairs kind of subsequent to this exercise. But after we presented that initial report, we looked at multiple different things. Some additional design options and concepts were requested at reduced square footage. So we went through a very iterative process looking to shrink down the overall building size. We looked at multiple different procurement options on how the project will be ultimately bid and built and how that might affect the overall cost. Eventually taking all of those different kind of steps and options along the way and presenting that earlier this year. And even recently doing an additional concept, which is the main concept that we'll be reviewing here tonight, which was a single story at that reduced square footage. And we will also be discussing the addition renovation scheme as well. And we're here today at those community update presentations, ensuring that you guys are educated on the options before you. And all of this is working towards a ballot vote in November. So current status, we've completed those conceptual design options for a police headquarters, and I kind of just captured all of those pieces, so I will not reiterate that here. Existing conditions. So one thing that we've kind of talked about is pictures really don't do the existing condition within the police station justice. Some of the things that we are looking at, but we wanted to share with you here tonight, but do encourage you if you have the time to visit the station yourself. It's not only functional deficiencies, looking at the exterior envelope, looking at some of the masonry, as well as some of the water damage, which is tied to some of those immediate repairs, but also looking at operational deficiencies. And I'll give an example of I was recently in the station, actually the day of our last public forum, and I hadn't been there in a little bit of time since we had done those building evaluations and meetings. I don't necessarily always walk into the basement every time we're there for a meeting. And I call it the basement because it truly is the basement, but that is very much where a lot of the mission critical space for the department exists. It's where all the cells are, where they detain prisoners. It's where all of the evidentiary processing is. And the ceiling height is very tight and low in there. And I kind of imagined myself in one of those images, you can see a ramp coming in from the back door. As an officer, kind of navigating that ramp with the potential detainee, walking through kind of a barred, secure prisoner processing area, which current standards do not have cell-like front doors like that, because there's a lot of opportunities for that potential detainee to either cause harm to themselves or harm to the officer. You've kind of got to navigate through this tight space, through that secure zone into the booking area, and then kind of back again. And it's a space that other officers pass through. You're in a shared corridor. It's very uncomfortable. And I think a lot of the measures that we utilize in current facility design are not present in that facility. And I think that that's something that, being there in that space was really apparent to me. But we look at just more than just the systems and their age. We really look at how each of those operations flow. It's not simply a building where it's an office and you just come, you sit at your desk, and then you go to your patrol vehicle. There's a lot of different operations that have to occur safely within the facility. Everything from how the evidence is handled to how that custodial responsibility of the town and how that person is safely detained. So we really look at every aspect of the facility, not just kind of the systems and the constructability. So some of those key takeaways. Security is definitely one that we honed in on relative to the internal security, but specifically the officer's safety and other personnel or prisoner safety and health. We looked at accessibility. How is it if a person is unable to use stairs? How do they access the public lobby, and how do they seek service if necessary? Kind of how they work their way through the facility. We look at interior environmental quality, constructability concerns, and also just the functionability of each space, and is it really supporting the program and the workflow that is intended to. So diving a little bit into our process, when we began this discussion about the project, a few goals came to the surface, and we like to identify some of those key objectives of a project early so that we ensure those space needs, when we list out each of those spaces, that they align with what those goals were. That really ensures that we're optimizing the values and the square footage, and that results in the best return in investment. So a few themes here was health and safety. I think I touched on that pretty in depth relative to the existing conditions. Adaptability, recruitment and retention is kind of tied to that space as well, as a level of professionalism. Accreditation was talked about a fair amount relative to how can the space design support future accreditation. So upon that initial discussion with the department, we determined a space needs of around 21,600 square feet. And there's a lot of different components that go into that overall square footage. We're calculating down to every closet space and storage space, everything up to every garage space. So everything is kind of drawn out. We take all of the needs shared by the department, and we really draw out what each of those spaces look like, and that comes into a total building, potential building square footage. But this process is commonly very iterative. You have an idea of who needs offices and how much space you need for evidence, and once you see it on paper for the first time, there is a bit of a, okay, well, what can we afford from a square footage standpoint, and how do these two things align? Are there opportunities for overlap? So that space needs went through multiple revisions, and it dwindled, it's kind of worked its way down from the 21,680 square feet down to around 17,965 square feet, and then furthermore to the 14,830 square feet. And there's a few things that we're looking to do or discussing while we're going through this process. Is can we maintain kind of that programmatic need, or is this something that is just too far out, and it might be something that the department needs to compromise on. We also talked about what types of spaces need to be within the main facility, and if there was an opportunity to potentially pull out some storage spaces or other spaces, garage-like spaces, that maybe didn't need all of that, the same resiliency that the main facility needs. One thing we do look at as an emergency response facility, an essential facility according to the code, it is required to have a high level of resiliency. So the lateral loading and a lot of different requirements of the code apply to that facility. Well, not every space within the police program is essential to its functionality in those worst conditions. So there is an opportunity to take some of that space and fit out an outbuilding, which is the path that the department and the task force took, and you get a much lower cost per square foot on a facility like that. So you'll see there that the program is broken out into two components, one the main facility square footage, and then one the outbuilding square footage. So a little bit further into this iterative process. So when we're looking at your program in particular, we're looking at all of the different types of spaces, and we look at office space, mission critical space, what we call mission critical space, which is really tied to the immediate operations of the police department within the facility. And many of those items are heavily driven by standards, and might not be able to, a cell size is a cell size, so we kind of break that out as a separate piece of the program. We talk about building anatomy, which is essentially everything that makes the building work, corridors, walls, your mechanical spaces. And then we talk about community spaces, or spaces that are more accessible or accessible to the public, that may also meet a need of the department, but how does the program's percentages kind of align with industry standards and with other comparable facilities? So your program currently, at its current square footage, is 12% office space, 47% mission critical space, 26% building anatomy, and 15% community space. So as a part of this process, looking at office space in particular, and this is when we were going through those different options of the program, we looked at possible overlap. What is our total personnel or officers within the building versus available seats? Looking at meeting spaces, looking at roll call, looking at office environments. Are there opportunities for overlap? Can individuals who are on different shifts share the same desk? So this is a process that we did go through and resulted in some of those square footage reductions. Another one is building flexibility, but not necessarily too much flexibility. So this is a common practice when we look at locker rooms and or detention cells, is how can we provide universal accommodations while also allowing kind of for flexibility and growth, but it doesn't result in so many lockers or so many cells that the reality that you probably wouldn't utilize all of those. So instead of looking at just male and just female, you can look at them a little bit more holistically. So from a locker room standpoint, one option here that we looked at in reducing square footage is we bring down the locker count between male and female, but we allow for flexibility if the department's gender ratio shifts in the future, where a single wall could be moved and lockers could be shifted from male to female depending on the makeup of the department. The same can be said for the detention block. So the detention cells, instead of doing a very large male cell block and a very large female cell block to account for those different moments in time where you may have more female detainees and male detainees, we do universal, single, unisex cell blocks, which are individually sight and sound separated. That allows for the flexibility for that cell to house a male, a female, or a juvenile, and subsequently reduces the amount of cells in the actual program. So those are a few different ways, again, through that iterative process that the programming, the space needs is reduced. And just one more I wanted to touch on is that building anatomy. When we talk about net to gross adjustments. So that space needs list is a list of net area. It's the area within an office or within a roll call, a meeting room, within a sally port. It's the internal square footage to that space. But we have to account for all of the extra square footage it takes to arrange all of those spaces. Well, there can be savings in square footage when you seek to overlap the circulation space, the corridor space, with those and open things up to the corridor and allow for there not to be redundant circulation within the room, but you leverage kind of that corridor environment. That is also something that we looked at in embedding some of the support type spaces, reprographics, storage needs. We embed them right into the corridor space instead of creating small rooms off of that space, so that we're leveraging that circulation that we already have as a part of the program. So once we had kind of worked through the square footage needs of the department, and through different discussions with the task force, a few other sites were discussed, but we mostly focused on the existing site as it was optimally located for kind of high call volume area response. And so we took a deep dive into the potential and opportunities and potential challenges of that site. So some quick analysis here, and these are rules of thumb we kind of use to look at many different types of sites. But we were looking at neighborhood amenities, so making sure that those are maintained, but also understanding that they limit any expansion on the site. We were kind of, in this instance, anywhere that area that's kind of zoned 1, making sure that we stay within the current footprint of the facility, including those parking areas. We looked at secure parking and making sure that, and noting that there was inefficient secured storage for vehicles being protected as evidence, but also how are the cruisers being protected, where's the public parking, how is that, what is that path to the main entry like from either location. And then another thing we're assessing as an emergency response facility is multiple points of egress and ingress off-site. So we always want to ensure that the cruisers, if they are on site, they have multiple options off site, just in case something were to occur and block them in, that they had kind of multiple points of exit so that they could safely respond to whatever is necessary. And then another key thing, which I touched on relative to the existing conditions internally, is just support for that prisoner processing, prisoner release, detention area. The current station has no sally port. Where do those cruisers pull up? How do they remove a potential detainee from their vehicle, and how do they escort them into the facility, kind of starting at the parking lot, working our way all the way through the building. So this can give a sense of a few of the different site plans and site test fits we do. These are quick, this is a quick exercise, but they do take a lot of kind of forethought in exploring all these different options, looking at the building footprint, how does that potentially impact the existing facility. We looked at, can we build while the existing facility remains operational? We looked at, can we tear it down and provide temporary facilities and build new? Can we add to the existing building and renovate it? So this kind of captures a few of those different options. We looked at single story, 2-story, and kind of how that all affected the total project cost.
So one of the things we do think about is, what are the modern standards? Things have changed a lot. I've been doing this for, as it said, over 35 years, and the way we design public safety facilities today is a lot different than the way we did 35 years ago. There's a lot of technological changes, there's lots of requirement changes, accreditation standards come into play, and then there's new challenges in policing, particularly with building a relationship with the community. That's something that the International Association of Chiefs of Police focuses on really big these days with their trust building campaign. But there's all sorts of requirements on how you handle different components of the building. You can see in the middle left there's an evidence transfer location where officers drop off evidence in a secure location before it goes into the storage room. This is really important, maintaining the chain of custody of evidence so that you don't get people drawn into court because evidentiary material was sitting on left on a table somewhere. The detention facilities have changed an awful lot. We think a lot about the custodial responsibility of a community in that you have liability for making sure that the people that you detain stay safe. And that has led to a lot of different changes in cell design over the 35 years I've been doing this. And we continually look for ways to make safer detention facilities. Record storage is huge. It's an ever-changing thing. Right now, there's an awful lot of documents that need to be maintained in their hard copy form at the police station. We have seen the beginning of transitions that allow more digital content, but still evidence storage is a big deal. Officer locker facilities, making sure you have the room to store all of the gear for an individual officer. Many officers don't have an office in the building. Their office is the locker and the report prep room and the roll call room. Just above the lockers is, in fact, an example of a report prep room where you fill in the daily reports. And further up above that is your prisoner processing area. It's so important that you think about officer safety as well as detainee safety in this area. And to the left of that, that's the Sally Port Rebecca mentioned earlier when talking about the site test fits. This is a way for an officer to bring a detainee in the building, secure the doors before opening the cruiser, and bringing a detainee safely in the building. This is an essential part of making sure that both officer and detainee are safe, but also making sure the neighbors are safe as well. So there's been a lot of changes over the years. The technology one down in the lower part of the screen where it says training and technology infrastructure, that is, of course, always a changing beast, as I'm sure everybody's aware, because it's changing in every business.
Excuse me, Jeff?
Yes.
Is it possible to, I don't know if you know because of the way the slide's set up, but is it possible to show that the cell block area that you have with the processing room and the Sally Port alongside the current processing room and current way?
I'm going to run with no, not on the fly.
Good, but not that good.
But Rebecca could flip back to that barred cell way back in the existing conditions. She's trying to do that quickly now.
It was the one with the ramp coming down, I believe.
Right here.
There it is. Here, I'm gonna
That's
go
it.
rogue here and walk up there a minute.
Third from the left.
All right, I'm going to point a little bit. If you're at home and not, I don't know how they see me.
Yeah,
Okay. So let's see. Where's my ramp?
right there in the middle.
Right here in the middle.
Oh yeah, here we
Right
go.
there,
Over
yeah.
here. That door to the outside. That's the Sally Port. It's outside. There is no Sally Port garage where you bring detainees in and secure the doors. Officer goes around, opens the door of the cruiser, and escorts them in that ramp that does not meet the ADA standard. It's much too steep and it doesn't have the appropriate handrails. And then you walk into a hallway and there's a few cells scattered about, and you can see the cell up in the upper right there. Dramatic.
Is there any way you can enlarge that picture or that's?
No, I'm sorry. It was broken up to reduce the overall amount of slides. But you know, I did cells with bars at the very beginning of my career, and even then they didn't have horizontals because that's too much of an opportunity to tie something on, which is a great risk. I don't see the prisoner processing area in this slide, but you know, having the proper space to be able to handle the detainee, and I'm going to say the word, you know, control them so that they're not causing trouble, but also so that they're safe is so important. Every time somebody gets hurt in the detention area, it's liability for the community. So is that kind of what you hoped for?
Yeah, it's just that it's such a dramatic comparison that I just wanted to know if it was possible to put it side by side, that's all.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things is, you know, making sure that it's a sanitary environment is really critical as well. Everything inside the new cells that you design is epoxy paint, epoxy flooring. You can go in and hose it down and keep it clean and make sure it's safe for the next detainee that comes along. And it can be an unfortunate experience to be. Oh, we're experimenting, apparently. It can be an unfortunate experience to be detained in one of those much, much older cell designs. All right, I'm going to come back to my chair.
Thanks.
I have made a note, though, for the next public forum. We have done side-by-side comparisons before with, you know, current best practices or more modern design compared to your existing conditions. So I will make note of that, and we can do those for some of those key areas.
Thank you.
Well, you've been doing it 35 years. You can't help but point to things.
So the design options. So again, we looked at a lot of different concepts. These are a few additional concepts that were explored at a bunch of those different square footages. These were all new construction options, but we did also look at addition renovation, and it was noted previously that this includes 2 additions. We did not look at the current program after assessing your existing facility and some of the constraints. I think we are pretty confident in saying that even at a reduced program, the facility would need some type of addition at the bare minimum for the sally ports, which we just talked extensively about, is that garage space. You don't have any current aspect of your facility that would allow for that type of space. But this example was an option that was explored for kind of a full renovation and 2 additions. And we looked at a lot of different, pros and cons to each test fit that we threw up on that kind of that slide already. So there was a lot of this, but a few things that we noted. One thing that we found most challenging about working within the existing facility, and it's not to say that it can't be, this is a solution that did kind of overcome that, but one thing that was challenging is that there is a lot of internal levels to your existing facility. It's not simply kind of a first floor, second floor. You've got a lot of ramps and stairs and internal changes of levels, which adds to the overall square footage because we need to accommodate for that. And if we're doing a full renovation, the entire facility will need to be brought up to current code. There are some exceptions when you're working with existing buildings. But if you start to do extensive renovation work, and there's levels and the code has different requirements, but once you get to a certain point, they expect you to bring that entire building up to current code. So that was one thing we did find a little challenging, and it resulted in, not every aspect of the program being, adjacent to having those most appropriate or best adjacencies. A positive here is that the asset was being reused. It would require temporary facilities during construction, so the entire department would have to be relocated, or we would have to look at some substantial phased construction, which would extend that overall duration, which also has, cost impact. So that is something that would also have to be considered as a part of an addition renovation. Was there anything else you wanted to add to this scheme? No? Okay. So diving a little bit more internally to that plan. So again, this is the overall facility, and this was prior to us exploring an outbuilding. So this was full program as a part of this solution. We looked at kind of maintaining the entries somewhat proximate to where it was previously. The dispatch area was one area that we sought to include in that addition. This was mostly driven by all of the infrastructure required for that dispatch facility and ensuring that we could appropriately access that. When you enter the current facility, you are met by a set of stairs immediately. You can actually see that. I'll point that out with my cursor. This is the current front door, and this is the stair that you are met with currently when you enter the front of the building. So we kind of put that entry off to the side there, and the dispatch area, emergency communications, was positioned in that first addition. We then subsequently renovated the existing building, locating many of the staff facilities and evidentiary spaces, including all of our patrol spaces kind of in that main portion of the building. And then in the rear addition, which is off to it's kind of tucked in this corner here. Again, you can kind of see all the stairs and ramps that are necessary to meet all of these different points of entry and exit into the existing building. But this was mostly comprised of our detention areas, our prisoner processing, and our garage spaces. In subsequent iterations, these different garage spaces were kind of brought together and looked at. There was multifunctionality, so they were kind of brought into one garage space and then brought into the outbuilding. But in this case, we had some detention cells, prisoner processing, sally ports, and some other vehicle processing garage space. And then on the second floor of that existing facility, it was most of the administrative office spaces, as well as the training municipal court space. This also included all of your records as well. This was a conceptual rendering of what that may look like. And again, one thing that we note here is that this is very early on in the design process. We have many subsequent design stages where we get into a much higher level of detail, material selection, but we always like to give a sense of what that floor plan may look like, volumetrically. We looked to continue in here in this option. We looked to continue to use a lot of the materials that were on site. One thing from a exterior material standpoint that we are looking at is, we talked about brick a fair amount in past presentations, that it has intrinsic ballistic protection and intrinsic value. So it is a great material choice for police stations. But we also look at maintenance, durability, how is it being detailed to ensure that it can serve the community for decades to come. So the second design that we wanted to review today was a single-story new construction. This is the most recent design, and this is at the 13,600 square feet. In this option, the new facility would be constructed behind the existing building while the existing building remained operational. We talked about a need for temporary off-site parking because we would be building our new station essentially in the current police parking lot in the rear. We were able to create as much distance between that existing facility and our new building as possible. I think this has the largest gap out of all of the options we explored. But we would still need to address kind of some of that rear access and temporary parking needs. But from an overall site plan standpoint, we were able to kind of have a front public parking lot with a clear main entry and a clear path to that main entry with all that public parking right in front. And that public parking is intended to also support a community event in the training community space, as well as municipal court functions. There is then a gate, which is kind of drawn in. It connects from this corner of the building and works its way across this way so that the lots in the back here are secure for police parking. This is also where your outbuilding would be situated and potential impound lot for vehicles being maintained as evidence. And then after this would be completed, the existing facility would be demolished and the remainder of the site work would be completed. So with the new construction option, I talked a little bit about some of the challenges with an addition renovation, and we find this across the board. Typically, when you are drawing a new construction building and an existing renovation, according to the same program, your new construction will be slightly more efficient because you don't have to work within the framework of that existing facility. So this is a slightly smaller square footage, and all of our new construction schemes were slightly smaller than any addition renovation schemes. And it does allow you to kind of put spaces exactly where you want them. So that is one thing to note kind of as a difference between the two. But this also will require some additional construction time because we have that existing facility on site. And there is some site logistics that would have to be worked out while these two things are simultaneously occurring on site. So a few observations on the site design. This floor plan has the entry in the upper right. So from a site plan, it was just turned 90 degrees. But you have that entry point. You've got multiple different public spaces off of that main lobby, including public interview, which is a space for the public to be met. Okay, so public interview space is just off of the lobby there. It is important to look at, not all interview spaces within a police facility are created equally. You have interview spaces where, someone may be coming to report a crime, may be a victim of a crime, may just want to have a conversation with an officer. Creating the right type of environment to have that type of conversation is really important in how the department interacts with the community. You have multiple service points off of that main lobby, including your main dispatch window, which is usually your main desk and point of contact, but you also have direct access to records and the clerk, municipal court clerk. Also off of that main lobby is that training community space. And the thought here is that that space could be isolated to serve the public if it was a community event, so that it would be accessed off the public lobby and the rest of the station is secure. It could also be accessed from the secure side of the facility for the police if they are doing a training, and could subsequently be secured from any public entering that type of training. So ensuring that you kind of have those two access points, and where does our public zone kind of interact with our secure zone. So after you kind of walk through that public lobby area, you have entered into the secure part of this facility. You have records and a few administrative offices just to your right along that front edge, as well as your records archive in that corner. You've got some of those reprographics and support storage spaces lining those corridors, as well as you kind of turn around some staff facilities there, and as you kind of turn down that corridor here, you are met with the investigative bureau, as well as some additional comm equipment to support all of the dispatch functionality. It's always important to keep these two as adjacent as possible to ensure efficiency of runs and ease of adjustment in the future as technology changes. As you come down that corridor, you are met with some patrol spaces on the left, your patrol lieutenants, your roll call, break room, and report prep is down at the end of the hall. On the right, you have a small fitness space, as well as your armorer, weapons cleaning, and additional long gun storage, kind of positioned here at the corner. The intent is that your patrol staff would mostly be coming in as to be one of your main staff entry points here, and you'd want to keep a lot of their spaces that they utilize within the facility. Jeff mentioned, they have a locker and they have space to write their reports, but most of their work is not done within an office environment, so we want to keep those proximate to where they enter and exit the facility. As you kind of come down this hallway, after you've passed kind of the locker facility and that report prep, is you have most of the detention, prisoner processing, and Sally Port. So that block of the building is in this lower right-hand corner. Again, looking at floor plan kind of distribution and separation, we've got the public zone, we've got the secure police zone, and then we also have the detention zone for the prisoners as well. We wanted to keep evidentiary processing very proximate to where the officers are coming in with a detainee, again, to simplify that chain of custody. So those are located just here off of the hallway, where you've got your main receiving area and processing of evidence, as well as your subsequent rooms for evidence storage and drugs, weapons, and valuables. And this very much aligns with accreditation requirements for each of those components of evidentiary storage. In the detention area or cell block, you can see a few of those different configurations of, you've got unisex cell blocks here, so that again is allowing for flexibility depending on if it's a male, female, juvenile, whatever the kind of makeup of detainees are that evening. You kind of have multiple different options on how to detain them. And that process, coming in, bringing your vehicle in, walking immediately into the facility, processing them all within that clean, safe environment, and detaining them all before exiting into a shared corridor. In the outbuilding, one question that we received last time is what types of program is in the outbuilding. It is vehicle storage, bulk property storage, traffic signs, some small trailers, and is the intent of that building would be a tempered space, so protected from the weather, but it would not be, or it would be cold storage. Cold storage, so it would be cold storage, so it wouldn't be fully heated, but it would be protected from the weather. So this is just an aerial view so that everyone kind of can orient themselves. The red box here would be the existing station. That the public lot right now kind of sits in front here. And we would be building to the rear and to the kind of to the left behind the existing station. This is again a conceptual view of what that design may look like. This is again a single-story option. We did discuss with our estimator and with the task force whether a flat roof would be more cost-effective or a partially pitched roof. If you noticed in the aerial view, there's a little bit of both here. We have a partially pitched around the edge with a flat area in the middle. One, to keep the building height down relative to the residential context around it, but also to ensure we've got some area for rooftop equipment, but also to, and this ended up being actually the more cost-effective option compared to the flat roof scheme, but we did explore both with the task force and with our third-party estimator. So some views of what that potentially would look like. So opinion of total project cost. So this is for the single-story new construction option, but we wanted to talk a little bit about cost control and kind of some of those major cost drivers for projects of this type. So from a cost control standpoint, as you guys are around your schematic design completion, so what this is really talks about is where is your highest impact to cost, and it's very much tied to what our number one cost driver is. And the number one cost driver for projects like this is square footage, which is why that iterative process in programming the building appropriately is such an important step and really does have the greatest impact to your overall project cost. The ease of changing that obviously is kind of reduced as you go through each of these phases. Our schematic design phase, it's a lot easier for us to make a change. Our engineers are not as far along. So the cost of those changes are less. Kind of as you go through each documentation and development phase, that becomes harder and harder. So just understanding that at this point in time, you guys have the greatest opportunity to impact the total project cost. And as we continue, if we are to continue in the future, those options do reduce. So how do you protect kind of the community and ensure that the project fits within what is feasible, financially feasible for the town? So again, square footage is that number one driver of cost in facilities like this. It's not necessarily equivalent to other commercial construction. Due to the nature of a facility like this, that is your number one cost driver. We look at new construction versus addition renovation. How can we reduce the project in size? Shortening of timeline are all things that need to be considered when looking at all of these different options. Floor plan efficiency. I talked a little bit about that net to gross. We want to reduce that as much as possible while still meeting the programmatic needs of the department. And in many of those conversations when we were going through the programming, we're talking about, we talk about building life cycle. The building is going to be built to last you 50 plus years, but how long can the program support the department? How long will the department outgrow the types of spaces or even the flexibility that we include within the floor plan? So ensuring that we're still meeting all those programmatic needs, but while reducing any of that redundant circulation is something that is really important, and again, keeping that square footage low. Operational continuity. So as a police department, they have to remain operational during every phase of this process. We talked about temporary operations, but also extended general conditions. So temporary operations, meaning if we were to renovate the existing facility, we would need either trailers or other municipal space, or space would have to be rented for the department to function out of. This would include any of their kind of essential spaces, records keeping, detention, processing areas, evidentiary storage. How does that all kind of fit within a temporary operations off-site? But also extended general conditions. So when you are looking at a project where you're building while maintaining the existing building and then demoing that extends your construction timeline, which can increase the cost for the general contractor to be on site, which is what we call extended general conditions. So the cost of them being there adds to that total project cost. So looking at both of those from a cost analysis standpoint is really important. One, to ensure operations are continued and maintained, but also, what is the cost differences between those options. Essential facility designation, so code required resiliency, we talked a little bit about that, is being in a step that the department and the task force and the council has already taken, is really saying, okay, what space does not need to be within that essential facility, and how can we maximize that square footage to ensure we are meeting all the code required resiliency, but also removing any space that can be more just cold storage to ensure that town assets are protected, but there's not a high cost per square foot in order to do so. Project positioning, so looking at sites, site acquisition and required site work. This parcel that was studied primarily is town owned. It's previously developed. We have had many other projects that are dealing with contaminated sites, sites with wetlands, sites in floodplains, sites with a fair amount of site work because they're not developed and they need to be cleared, et cetera. So there's a lot of sites come in many different forms. So looking at how that project is being positioned also has a high impact to your total project cost. So the current opinion of probable cost for this facility is $18 million. That is comprised of a few different pieces, and this is something that we send to someone outside of our firm. So one of the consultants we work with is a third-party estimator. That's all they do is construction estimating. They have a great pulse on the current market, what the contractors are seeing, what the subcontractors are seeing. So we always, and it is very tempting sometimes to make your design kind of fit within a framework if you know kind of the threshold. So we always like to send that to a third party so we get in kind of an unbiased opinion of what the probable costs may be. So there's three different pieces. You've got your construction costs, your project development and equipment costs, and your contingency. And all of those three pieces make up the opinion of $17.98 million. Now, this estimate assumes a few things. It assumes that the project were to be funded in November and that construction would start the following September, so September 2024, and the construction would last 16 months. And those are all really important aspects to any estimate because you want to make sure that it is escalated out according to that timeline and that we are accounting for those general conditions for that project duration. So if any of those dates shift or the project, it takes 24 months instead of 16 months, that would affect your overall cost. So we want to make sure that we are taking those assumptions into consideration. So of each of those pieces, kind of what is construction cost, what is project development costs, and what is contingency. So in the construction cost bucket, this number is really the number you would receive on bid day. It's the brick and mortar. It's the site costs, it's all of the construction and demolition costs, so it includes the building demolition that is in that number. It includes abatement costs, exterior, interior, all building systems. Basically anything that general contractor would provide is in that hard construction cost. That does include cost escalation to the midpoint of construction, so it is escalated well into 2025. And it also takes into consideration current prevailing wage rates as this project would require us to use those. The project development costs is everything else that is required to make a project happen. So it includes the professional fees, testing and inspections during construction. It includes furniture and fixtures and equipment to fit out the new building. It includes communications equipment for your dispatch center, bidding costs, reprographics costs, relocation costs, utility back charges, all of those additional project development costs, what we really call as soft costs compared to the hard costs that are required to create an all-in project cost. The third component is contingency. So this estimate is being done at a conceptual schematic level. There's a lot of unknowns, not only within our design, but also just in the project in totality. There's many different steps that need to occur after this. So there are three kind of pieces of contingency that are included within this budget. There's the owner's contingency, which will remain as a part of the budget, and that is to protect against unforeseens or change of cost during construction. So that is a typical percentage that is carried for the town. There's a project development contingency, so there's a small contingency on that soft cost bucket that we just talked about, because many of those line items are budgetary, and the town would seek actual quotes from all of those different individuals, and there might be a little bit up or down in each of those categories. So there's a little bit of contingency there to protect and shifts in that area, as well as the design and estimating contingency, which is one that actually gets absorbed typically into the project, and that is something that our estimator puts on the project because it is at such an early developmental stage. We do, as a part of our process, send out the design to the estimator at every milestone phase, and that contingency slowly comes down as they get more and more information from us. So potential financing, tax impact, and cost control. So I'm going to briefly discuss the potential financing, but I know there are individuals here that can answer more in-depth questions relative to tax impacts. So some potential financing options that the town has explored, one being a level debt service. So assuming the total project cost of $18 million, this projection assumes a 20-year term, 4% interest, with an incremental amount on the tax rate. Using that type of cost analysis, the estimated tax rate impact would be about 68 cents per thousand. So how does that translate? So again, if a level debt service was added today, that tax rate would increase by 68% per thousand. For a $350,000 home, that would be $237 per year. For a $550,000 home, that would be $372 per year. That is one option being explored. Another option is a modified debt service. This looks at a reduction in tax rate impact for the first 2 years. So this looks at a reduced tax rate impact for fiscal year 2025 and 2026, averaging around 18 cents per thousand. In subsequent years, you would be looking at that similar 68 cents per for the tax rate impact per thousand. So this is just a modified service so that would be reduced for those initial 2 years. And this gives a sense of what the existing and proposed debt service for the town would be, and essentially trying to align this debt as other debt rolls off. So a few cost control measures. I mentioned that we do send to a third-party professional estimating company at the conclusion of all major design phases. We also do identify distinct portions of work that can be packaged as alternates, again, to protect us on bid day. We discuss product availability and any items that we are currently designing as a part of the project that may be subject to extreme escalation or supply chain challenges. We had a few projects, police facilities, that were under construction or under design during the pandemic, and this was very important to ensure that we were not including items that really could not meet our project schedule. So we have kind of continued that kind of process that helped us through the pandemic in creating continual conversations with our estimating consultants and with our construction partners to allow us to be kind of nimble in our design, but also the most cost-effective in avoiding any of those long lead type items. So some potential next steps. So in moving forward with a design, if the ballot vote is positive in November, we would be able to continue into the design phases. Again, continuously kind of value engineering that solution to ensure we are aligning with the approved budget. Essentially, design development would run through February 2024, construction documentation running through the summer, about midpoint of the summer, and we would be bidding for a start of construction in the fall of 2024. That would put our construction completion in around the beginning of 2026.
you want to open up to questions now? All set?
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Anyone like to come up and ask any questions? If you could go to the podium and start with your name and your address, please.
Can we put the lights back on, please, Ray? Oh, thank you.
Joey Savigny, 1790 Pound Hill Road. First question I have is for the town council. I'm on the budget committee, and Thursday night, when I went on the webpage for the town, all the financial stuff for the police station wasn't there. It was there earlier in the week. I went to print a few things off to bring to the budget committee meeting, and it wasn't there. So I don't know if you were aware of that, if it was just a glitch or...
No. Do we know why it's been taken down, or?
I know.
Do we know why?
What?
Yeah, yes.
I think that question's best addressed to the council. There was numerous emails asking to remove things.
Yeah.
Councilor Hamilton and President Al, do you care to address that?
I'll be happy to address that, because what we had up there was a frequently asked questions document, and it did not portray the two options. It gave the 18 cents and the $80.25 only.
So it wasn't the one that was up that we just saw
So
up
we
here?
were told by bond counsel that we have to be very careful that we're not misrepresenting, that we provide, like the one tonight. So this is new. This was not, in previous ones. A lot of the slides tonight are new, and I think they're great. I think they're very well done. So for instance, when you're looking at potential tax impact here, right, this was not on the information that was provided us before. What we had
Where did you get,
was-
sorry, Counselor Rebecca, where did you get that information from? From the packet, so it came from there. It came from what the advisor had provided.
Right, what I'm saying is this is a newer slide, and it's
Yeah.
very well represented as
Yeah,
opposed
yeah.
to the other one. And what it basically tells you is very clear, and again, according to bond counsel, we have to be very careful how we portray it, right? So, first of all, we have not made a decision whether or not to go with a quote modified versus the regular, debt service. The modified will add $284,000 to the debt. I'm personally not in favor of that, to give people a couple of years of, what is, as we stated, it's going to be another, in year 3, it'll go up to 68 cents, right? But this is better, and I asked the administrator if he would remove that, because I was afraid that what we were doing to people is giving them a false sense of hope that it would only be $82.50, 18 cents per thousand, right?
Who was that shared with? Because I didn't know that the changes would be made without speaking about it as a council.
So the changes were made by Tecton, which is great.
No, I know the changes
Yeah.
here.
So what we have here now is the tax rate, as we said here, would be for a $350,000 home for $236, right, per year. For a $450,000 home for $304, for a $550,000 home, $372. That's great. That's what people want, the bottom line.
So the new number is going to be posted?
I would hope that we can put this new presentation, which is different from the one we had on the 20th. There are several other slides that are added that give more information, and I think they're done very well.
So yes, we did add some
Yeah.
slides. I
Mhm.
do not believe that those options were added.
Yeah, this slide was not on the previous one.
Joe, sorry to interrupt, Counselor. Joe, are you talking about the one that the advisor had provided, or are you talking about the first presentation that they had done with the financials specifically?
On the beginning of last week, when I went on, there was a whole page with all the financial stuff. It showed, there was a couple of different charts.
So this, whatever the financial advisor gave us, is that?
I'm
what-
assuming so. It had a few different charts on it with numbers,
Yeah,
almost like what
Counselor,
was
go-
on the board up here
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, Counselor, go to the last page, I think,
Yep.
just to refresh his memory.
Yeah, so that should have been on. I mean, that's not what I asked to be taken off. I asked because I didn't feel that the representation that we had was providing people with both options, right? The fact that It could be $82 if the council decides to go with the modified, but it most likely also could be $372, right? So, do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I just don't understand if people who came on to look at the site earlier saw numbers, and now people coming on the site now are going to see numbers.
They should have seen.
As we're moving
this was
along, we keep
on.
changing what we're putting on
Yeah, no,
this, on the site.
This financials, if you're talking about the financials, that should be on there. It should still be on. In fact, we can go on and look at it now. It is? Okay.
It's on there now. It wasn't Thursday night.
No, that, I don't understand
So-
that. I don't have access to the,
No, so
website.
it was taken down Tuesday under request of the council person on Tuesday afternoon. I thought about it. It was a public document. It was paid for by taxpayer money. I sent Council President as well as Council Hamilton an email saying that I was putting it back up its entirety. It went up just before 7 p.m. on Thursday. You may have been in the Budget Committee.
I was probably in the budget committee. We were in at 6 o'clock.
but I
Yeah.
think we're talking about two different things. You know, I want to be clear that the frequently asked questions page that was given out at the first meeting here of the education did not have a well-defined level debt service. It did have a well-defined modified debt service.
Okay.
So I think
All right,
that's,
so it's,
I
just
think
as long
it's
as
unfair
back-
to people,
As long
right?
as the numbers are back up there, that was
Yeah.
basically my concern.
Well, we'll make sure, you said it is up now? Now, so these are the financials where, you know,
Now,
Steve
what's up now? The
Massaroni,
new slides, or did the old slides go back up?
920
Okay.
is up.
Just before 7 p.m. on Thursday.
But it does
Okay.
not show the financial potential tax impact at 68 cents. It shows it at 18 cents.
But didn't they just have a chart up there that showed it all the way out through the end of the
Yeah,
bond?
which is, yes.
Okay.
Yes, well, that wasn't, it was just that frequently asked questions page, that's all it was.
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you.
So can I just, Mrs. Linsky, can I just have some clarification? I didn't see it up there. I have my own, the email, so I didn't look at the towns. What exactly was on there and what was taken off? I'm not clear on that.
There was a slide,
One
it was referred to as slide number 34 and 35. Don't hold me to it. I would ask the Tecton paginate the slides from now on, put numbers up the slides. It would certainly help us tremendously. So trying to back into the request of the council is, the ones that were taken off was the modified debt service and the potential tax impact, which would show if it was 68 cents per thousand for a $350,000 household valuation, 450 and 550,000 valuation. So those were taken down Tuesday late morning and then put back up Thursday just before 7 p.m.
The one that was taken down was the one that you and I talked about, was a frequently asked questions, one-page item that did not represent the 68 cents per 1,000. And I said I felt uncomfortable with that because it was misrepresentation, and also because our bond counsel told us to be very clear when we're presenting options.
Council, I'd be happy to give you copies of all the emails that were sent back and forth.
Yeah, no, I
Again,
have them.
refresh your memory.
No, my memory doesn't need to be refreshed. What I don't
think it
want to
does.
do, no, it doesn't, sir. All I want to do is make sure that everybody here, everybody watching, everybody voting is fully aware of what they're voting for, and then they can vote. That's it.
And what I want to make everybody aware of is a public presentation that was given 41 slides that was posted up on the, paid for by the taxpayers of this town, is made available for anybody to interpret what it says.
But it didn't have both options. So it's
I can
not,
tell you there was 41 slides. And that's what was presented on the 20th, and that was what
I
was-
understand that, which was not what we had agreed to. What I'm saying right now is this potential tax impact is exactly what we said to people.
Is that new?
This is the new
Well,
one.
I don't
Yes,
say, that,
from-
that brings up another topic.
From, so
The
this
town
is from tonight.
administrator is not sent those presentations. I had to
Neither
call
are we.
Tecton on Thursday to get it from the direct source
Well-
so I could put it up on Thursday.
And that's
So I
unfortunate
would
for you.
appreciate being involved in all communications that go between council
But
members.
we don't see them
We
ahead of
don't
time
see it either. We just got this tonight.
We don't see them.
We
ahead
don't
Madam
see
President,
anything
if I may.
prior to.
Madam President, if I may. This new PowerPoint,
This new one, tonight,
we
that
will
we
get it
just saw.
we will get it to the clerk, to the council president, to
Okay.
the administrator, to be replaced on the thing. But some of those pages were in the original.
And some were
They
not.
were in the original. And but I don't want to beat this thing to death. It doesn't matter. We're going to put up new information in the morning. You will have new information up there. Right now, I have professionals sitting here to answer questions on this project, not to debate what's on the town's website if we can. You want to debate that, we can do that at another
Well,
time.
if
But we're going to
that's
put
what
up, we're going to put up the newest information that you just saw will be put on the website in the morning. That's the best that we
Well,
can do.
Make sure the administrator gets it.
He will. The council president, the town clerk, and the administrator will all get it, so that somehow it will be up there. But I don't want to continue this discussion. I have professionals sitting here to answer questions on this project.
Well,
That's
I
what,
think
that's what
that-
this
I-
meeting, that's what this meeting is for.
Okay.
To answer questions on the project.
I think the bottom line of what it's going to cost taxpayers is part of this project.
And it is. It is in the project.
And this is new. We just saw it, they just saw it, the administrator just saw it, okay? That should have been something that we've all known for a while because we had our financial advisor provide us this. Yeah, no, I'm just saying that I think it's very important that people know what they're voting on, that's all, that's important.
God, do I miss this place. My name's Ed Yazbek. Spent 20 years of sentence up at that table and various other committees. First, I'll start by saying thank you to everybody on the building committee and the town council, because it's a thankless job, and I know better than anybody in the room how thankless it is. So, you said questions only. I'm hoping that means comments, or I'll come back around after. But I think the questions in front of the council are twofold. Number one, do we build a new building or do we renovate the existing? Okay? Because the way the bond was issued, it appears that the control is within your purview to whether renovate or control, assuming it gets passed by the taxpayers. I think it would be a great injustice to the taxpayers if you don't make up your mind before that ballot goes out as to whether it's a new building or an existing renovation. That's number one. Number two, a question for the architects. When you do renovate a building that was renovated 50 years ago and built, Paul, when was Bushy School built?
1954, I believe.
Okay, so it's older than me, but not by much. Okay? The point is that it's already met its life cycle as a school, and it's already met its life cycle as a police station. You don't have to be in just the general common sense of it, okay? 18 million is a lot of money. Believe me, I spend $12,000 a year paying into the coffers here to pay for police, fire, and all the other things, okay? I'm not the largest taxpayer, but I've always sent a chunk of change over to Town Hall. And if anybody knows me that works with me in 20 years, knows that I hate spending money, okay? So, all of that aside, that kind of lays the groundwork. I do have conflicts here, okay? My son's a police officer, not in this town. Deliberately not in this town because of all the Snapchat, Facebook garbage that goes on. He needed to be out of this town because he's not going to step in my shadow, because every time he turned around, he would have had a problem. And that's too bad, but that happened, okay? And there's other reasons for that, but he's fine. He's in a department that has a building that's 3-4 years old. Go look at that building. You want to see pictures side by side? Please do yourself a favor. Have Chief Lafferty make an appointment with Chief Benson in Cumberland and go look at that building. I went through that building, inch by inch. I've also recently been through the police station. Not inch by inch, but I got enough. I saw enough for what I wanted to see. I saw the the booking room, I saw all of that. It's deplorable. And you can't put lipstick on a pig. The question for the architects is, if we're going to renovate the existing building, would you say, in your professional opinion, that there are more change orders when you do a renovation versus a new construction?
There is a much greater chance of encountering unforeseen conditions in a renovation than on new construction. That is true.
All right, and that's my belief too. So, another conflict. I'm the accountant for the New England Chiefs of Police, the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association, the Rhode Island Accreditation Committee. I will tell you that I hear talk about buildings all the time at meetings, and who's good building, and who's a good builder, who's a good architect, who's this, who's that. This company you have is A number one, and I don't know them from a hole in the wall. I met them tonight, okay? You have an excellent company. You should take advantage of their knowledge. But be from Missouri, just like I was when I was sitting there. Go out and look. Go look at Cumberland. You want to see a really nice police department, go look at North Providence. But they had Google money. We don't have Google money. We're not going to have Google money, okay? So issue number one is you have to take a stand. You have to do the leadership thing, and you have to tell the taxpayers you're either renovating or building new. I'm proposing we build new. I don't know where you're going to store a police department for 2 years of construction and renovating an old. That's another story. But if you want to go that route, fine, at least let the taxpayers know. Back to whatever we were arguing about for 15 minutes. This item from PFM, which you either paid for or asked them to produce, had the information about how to finance the $18 million. That, I understand, is your second responsibility. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to make sure I understand this. One is new or renovate. Second thing, how to pay for. Now, I wasn't involved in the last bond issue, but I was involved in the one before that. And I sat with those people over there. I was on that committee for the middle school. And when I got off that committee, well, I was on it as part of being on the town council, being part of the leadership team, if you will, okay? And I always said, we're going to make it affordable for the taxpayers if the taxpayers decide we need a middle school. And we made it affordable. We ended up with economic development. And basically, the new income from that economic development up on 146A paid for that new school. That new school bond is going to be done in a few years. It's not that many years left to go on it. My, how time flies. Right? We were all younger. I had hair. I was skinnier. And we were all here. The best way to finance this, in my professional opinion, and you might say, well, that's not worth anything. Maybe it isn't, but I've done it long enough. Go with the interest-only option for the 2 years. Get the construction started. Get the bond money. It's not going to cost you the 18 cents. I'll tell you why. Because you're going to have the funds. You have to float the bond at the beginning of the process. You're going to have a ton of money in the bank. Anybody can do 4% right now. I'm sure our finance director, I don't even know who he or she is, can do 4% now, okay? If they can't, pro bono, I'll help out, and I'll get you the 4%. So whatever expense you have in those first 2 interest-only years will be offset, because not the entire 18 million goes out in the first year. It doesn't happen. It goes out in sections as work is done, right? So that's what we need to do. That's, I think, the best thing for the taxpayer. Forget about the $356 for the tax increase. Line it up so that when the middle school debt falls off, this debt comes in. The next thing I want to say is, it is hard for the chief over there to get any kind of help. Ask him specifically how hard it is to get young people to go into law enforcement. You have to give them the tools to do the job. Pure and simple. If you're not going to give them the tools to do the job, then, consider other alternatives. I don't think the state police will patrol our whole town. They won't do it. But you got to give them. He's competing with other towns that have brand-new departments to get qualified help in here. Very hard to do it in that building, okay? Extremely hard. The other thing is 18 million, I'll come back, it's a lot of money. You have a prisoner that goes a little batty down in that cave that you call a cell block now, and 18 million will look like a drop in the bucket when the lawsuits start flying. And I'm not trying to scare you. It's been a problem. It's amazing that nothing has happened since. You have to mitigate the potential liability. And the renovation of that building will never mitigate that liability, in my opinion. You need to start fresh. You need to get away from any potential change orders. You need to give them the tools they need to do their job, okay? And stop listening to people that are in social media and all this other stuff. It's the same people that were doing it 30 years ago. Not a one of them has the guts to run for office, or if they do, they drop out before they even get there. So let's do right by the taxpayers. Let's let the council make a decision as to how they're going to do, new or renovate, and tell the taxpayers it's not going to cost you a lot. We're going to time it so when the middle school debt comes off, police station debt goes on. They get the tools they need. We get the offices we need. Pure and simple. Thank you for your time.
Mally Jones, 62 Ferrier Street. Two things before I start. First, if my little anonymous friend is here, I am not against the police station. I don't know if you're here or not, but if you are, I am not against a new police station. And secondly, last time that I was, the last meeting that I was at, I talked about the cost per square foot, and you guys addressed it for me. I will just simply say that I still have concerns, because I know that someone else has posted about this, and I'm going to leave it at that, because there's something else I'd like to address tonight. At the last informational meeting, I asked council about how this bond issue would affect the tax rate, particularly in terms of increasing the rate past the 4% cap on the levy that the state has. And Mr. Zwolinski, you indicated that you would not support such an increase. And you know what? I think very few of us would want to see something going over the 4%, right? It's not very palatable. I did some calculations, though, to try and get a feeling for what holding to that 4% cap would mean in terms of the impact on the town budget when we float this bond. And I will say right now, these numbers are just estimates I made using assumptions, so just to get, for me, an insight into the possible impacts of the bond. My assumptions are that every year we would increase, the property tax rate would go up by the full 4%. Which I think if we're going to be floating a bond like this, we probably need to be looking at. And secondly, that assessment values stay constant. And the only reason that I did that, because I know that there's a back and forth between the assessment and then the tax rate, but because we don't know what the assessment's going to look like, these are the assumptions that I made. They will have a little bit of effect on it, but not a huge effect. So I ran the numbers twice, once with the bond being financed over the 20 years with no modifications to the payment, so payment of principal and interest right from year one. And then I ran it a second time with interest only for the first 2 years. And as an aside here, there was a comment in the Valley Breeze where it was basically stated that the retired municipal debt service that we're looking at, I think in 2028 or 2029, would essentially automatically go to servicing this debt, resulting in an average $82 cost per household. I think that's a problematic assumption, and I'll explain why. So I make no such assumption like that here. So when I ran these numbers, I did it through the 27-28 tax year, so I did 5 years worth here. I took the current tax rate, which is $14.27 per thousand, and I increased it by 4% every year over all of those years. And the numbers were concerning to me when I looked at that. So for instance, in the first year, if we're paying both interest and principal, and we do that 4% increase, that 4% increase will increase the tax rate by 57.1 cents. And the bond will cost us 68 cents. So that is telling us that we are looking at a decrease in the absolute dollars that the town will have to spend if that happens. And I know that, you know, we're going to be maybe making some money, but let's just look at this, at that. If we go with the standard setup for the bond, where we do interest and principal all 20 years, for those first 5 years, the increase in the tax rate from the 4% will always be less than the 68 cents. So we're going to be in a hole right from the very beginning there. If we go with the plan to do interest only for the first 2 years and then start doing interest and principal, those first 2 years, we will not be in a hole, but as soon as we get to year 3, once again, we're going to be looking at the tax rate increase being less than the bond cost. And for those first 2 years, the tax rate increase, of course, we would not get to be able to spend all of that money because some of it would be going to service the bond. We would only be getting 70 cents on the dollar there. The other 30, it's actually 31.5 cents in the first year would be going to service the bond. So we'd be looking at 68.5 cents of the increase that the town would actually get to use. So if we go with that unmodified financing, it's probable that the town is going to be looking at a reduction in the dollars that are available for non-bond things if we hold it to 4%, and this holds true for all 5 years. If we go with the modified, we'll be looking at being able to use only 70% of the tax increase for non-bond expenses for the first 2 years, and then again, we're going to be looking at a reduction in the absolute dollars available to non-bond expenses when we start paying principal in year 3. I understand that we're going to be seeing a reduction in those bond service costs in the future, and I understand that we look good on paper for a bond issuance in the amount of $18 million. I mean, I came to that meeting where the guy came and ran through the things, and on paper we look great, absolutely. Now, when I was looking to buy a house back in 1999, we got pre-approval in order to make our offer more attractive to sellers because the market was really heating up rapidly, multiple offers above cost. So we did what we were told to do, get pre-approval so that you look good, right? The bank pre-approved us for amount greater than what we thought we were going to finance and greater than what we were planning to spend on a house. We got this great pre-approval and I was, oh, excellent. You know, this opens up the market for us, right? We have more houses to look at. We have more options available to us. Then we ran the numbers for our particular situation. And it became apparent that what looked good on paper to the bank was not realistic for us unless we chose to eat peanut butter sandwiches for 3 or 4 years. My point is, what is on paper and what makes sense don't necessarily match. Can we afford to look at an absolute reduction in available tax dollars outside of this bond service, or being able to only use some of those dollars from a tax increase for non-bond expenditures? If not, there really are only 2 options here. We either increase taxes or we reduce town spending. I think that the need for a 3 to 5 year forecast has been brought up before, and I think that this becomes really important when we're looking at this bond. We can't look at the bond expenses in a vacuum. It needs to be looked at in conjunction with town contractual obligations, expected increases in goods and services due to inflation, needed and preventative maintenance for existing town buildings, and other projects the town wants to pursue, like the multi-generational center, which will have its own operational and maintenance costs that are not currently in our budget. Regardless of whether or not this bond question passes, I believe that the town needs to be looking at this bond issue as one part of a larger evaluation of fiscal needs and wants, to determine if what is on paper for the bond makes sense for North Smithfield in light of our fiscal obligations and our future plans. If it does, the residents need to be well informed about how this is going to impact them. I personally don't see how we can float this bond and meet our obligations without going over that 4% cap. And that is before looking at things not currently on the books, like the multi-generational center. If the council decides that the 4% cap is firm, then it will have the unenviable task, in conjunction with the town administrator, the school superintendent, and various department heads, of sharpening red pencils to decide what will get cut in order for us to be able to meet our payments. If the evaluation determines that $18 million does not make sense for us fiscally, then it needs to be determined how much of that 18 million should be spent. And we need to stick to that, even if that means going back to the drawing board. And that is if the bond passes or if the bond doesn't pass. Because if it doesn't pass, then we need to be thinking about next year and what we're going to finance. I don't know about anyone else here, but the last thing that I want to see again is that 5th quarter of taxes that we got shortly after I moved into this town, because the town needed to do a 5th quarter of taxes in order for it to be able to meet its financial obligations. That's where I am. We need to do something about the police station. I don't know if it is new or if it is renovation, but I do know that we need to be really careful about how we look at this, or else we're going to put ourselves in that same hole that we were in back in 2000. I think it was 2000. I just had a baby, so honestly, I'm honestly not sure what year that was, but it was either 99 or 2000. My question for you guys, you already know what I think, but my question for the architects is, if the town were to decide that 18 million is not a go, and they decided that they needed to look at something that was less than that, how would that impact the timeline?
It would invariably add to the timeline. Yeah.
I understand it would, but can you give us an
potentially
idea?
could add, if you wanted to go back to another design, we'd have to find out what could be cut from the program, or, arguably you could look for a better building, building in better condition to renovate. That is a possibility. There may be an acquisition cost associated with that that makes that less viable, but if you could find one. But if you just wanted to reduce program, well, then we'd have to figure out what else could be cut and do another conceptual design and do another estimating exercise. That would probably take, the last one we did very, very quickly. But I'm going to say that reasonably it's a 3 to 4 month exercise before you've got something ready, and then you've got to go back to a ballot question, which I'll leave it to the council to address when would be the next opportunity to go to a question on the ballot.
So if the ballot passes, but the council decides that 18 million is too much, then we're talking about pushing the timeline out 3 to 4 months. And if the ballot doesn't pass, then it's the 1 year, basically, until the next opportunity for the ballot, unless we do a special election before the presidential election in 2024, it sounds like.
That sounds correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Do I need to sign this? It's a joke. All right. So Anthony St. Ange, Finance Director. So I'm going to address a few things that this young lady had just brought up, on top of a few other things. So, Becca, can you bring up, actually, you have access, right? You have control right now, right? Can you, yeah, that's fine. Can you bring up the town website for me? Can you do that? Thanks. While you're doing that, in the meantime, so to your point last meeting, the last educational forum, you and I had a conversation over the phone. I hadn't gone deep enough into the conversation than I should have. So one of the things that was brought up that Ms. Hamilton had answered and the administrator had addressed was one of the 4 reasons as to why we can go over the 4% cap, which, yes, one of them is debt service. The other one being emergency service, which almost, to my knowledge, I haven't been in government long, but any of those times, it's never been allowed. Another one is a significant increase in non-property or in taxes and a significant decrease in non-property taxes. So obviously, we're not experiencing any of those other 3. Can you click on the very bottom one, North Smithfield, Rhode Island debt service projections and tax rate impact? Please click on here. Yep. And then scroll all the way down to the bottom, please. So obviously at this point, it'd be pretty stupid of us to just pull, all the 18 million right away and start making payments right away. At this point, I think we're all pretty much on the same page that delaying, at the very least, deferring payments 2 years is probably the best idea. As you can see, on the top grid, on the top table, max annual debt service, we have 1.3245 million. That's how much we'll be paying on basically a loan for the 18 million. And that will start right there as well, if we decided to go with the modified version. So I know we've already obviously covered this, but I just want to reiterate it for those who are watching or those who are here. We have about 1.255 million falling off in debt service at the start of fiscal year 27. So if we went with the modified, at this point, I'm not even going to talk about the top section because it wouldn't be smart for us to go with the top section. It just didn't make any sense. So modified debt service, at first, yes, we have anywhere from a 0.182 to a 0.178 impact on the tax rate. That's not saying it's going up. That's saying that this is the impact. This is how much this will cost at maximum at this current 4% coupon bond rate. Now, the net difference between 1.3245 million and 1.255 million, I think that's like 280 million or something like that, or 280,000?
287.
Thank you. So you're looking at 88,000 per year after starting fiscal year 27. That's less than that, right there. 356 and 348. So debt service is going down. At this current standings, if I was to take a snapshot of our current revenue, our current expenses, our current assessments, and then add these in, our rate would be going down. Obviously, that's in a vacuum, and things aren't rainbows, and everything goes up. So that probably won't happen. But at the very least, we're not looking at too much of an increase. Now, I did, as a side note, for anyone who's here, before you leave, I left a couple copies of the formula to get to the tax rate that everyone pays here, over here and back there. I brought a bunch of copies, so take them all. That breaks down the entire formula to get from beginning to end. And if anybody has any questions about it, please feel free, either call me, I prefer an email so I can get to it, or email me, and I'll be happy to explain it. Now, that's number one. Number two, and number three. Number three, I'm going to really blow you guys' mind. I don't know who said we all have to take the 18 million out all at once, but we don't. We can take, what do you think, Jeff, like 4 million right up front?
Without pulling out the numbers, that's probably on the high side right away.
Yeah, a fourth of it. So bond allows us to take 18 million. Now, no one said we had to take 18 million right away. We can take 18 million over the course of 20 years. So you pull 4 million. It's a lot smaller number. It's a lot smaller rate to swallow. And when you look at it like that, too, we have a healthy fund balance. I don't like touching into the savings. It's not my, it's my own personal finance, but we have a pretty healthy fund balance that we can pull on. Now, as the worst case scenario, this modified debt service, if we decided to, my advice would be to pull only portion of this bond, not all of it, FYI. But if we met in the middle, we decided to go with modified debt service, that 350 grand, I don't know, I think we can pull on debt service as a worst case scenario if we needed to mitigate the cost of this bond. And that, like I said, that's saying that we don't pull only a portion of this. Think about how small that 300, that's only, take that 350 divided by 4. That's a lot smaller. It's a lot better of a rate. So that's one. A few other points. I did look at a few things. The police average increase for year-over-year expenses, 5.69%. Just want to put that out there for everybody's little factoids. Tangibles overall have an increase or decrease of 1%. Ms. Alves, Council President, and Vice President DJ Ozier was in that meeting when that was described to us and broken down to us. I did not create that number. An external professional did. So there's our tangible point. Answer that one. So another thing to consider is when taxpayers decide to take one of these sheets that I've made, there's a lot of factors in this formula that go up and down, and it's kind of hard to, that's why I say, please feel free to call me, I can explain it, because it's kind of hard to figure out, well, there's so many factors in this, how can we figure this out going forward? Well, that's why I'm not a huge fan of this 3 to 5 year forecast, because there's so many factors. But one of the biggest factors is assessment value of everybody's home. So, I like this, again, I preface a lot of these things with in a vacuum or everything being equal, because assessment values, as we all know, changes. I mean, it's the assessment values at fiscal year 27 is not going to be the same at what we're paying now or what they're valued at now. So that denominator in that equation could get massive or it could get smaller. I don't know. I'm not real estate. So that's another factor that everyone has to consider when we're talking about the finances of this whole thing. Trying to think if I'm trying to make sure I'm not forgetting anything. I don't know if I can, if anyone again wants to call me about the formula, I have current to every variable in that equation. I have the current numbers for each of that I can break down and show and tell you and figure out how we got to our current commercial, tangible, and residential rates. That's not mine. Just making sure I'm hitting all the heads here. So our current levy, this is the last thing, and I'll get off the podium. Current levy was set by the council, 2.58%. I'd say that's pretty good in comparison because I used to work for the state, who I would see like a third to the fourth of the state, and 2.58 is pretty good. Now, if we were to plug in, again, all things being equal in the vacuum, the modified debt service, if we were to plug that in to our current numbers today, that's a 3.62% levy, not 2.58. So that's what, 1.1 increase percent in the levy. That's not the rates. Unfortunately, I didn't write down what the rates would be. That's my fault. I apologize. But eventually, again, this is all subjective based on assessments, revenue, expenditures. There's a lot of value. There's a lot of variables here. But if there's, like I said, I keep on reiterating it because I always welcome questions and I love educating people on what I do. So feel free to call me or email, preferably email, please. And if there's any questions, I'm going to stay here for a little bit longer. If there's any questions, feel free to holler over to me. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah. Anthony, do you think for future meetings, with what you're saying, could you show us each year with the usual percentage of the actual budget that would go up without the police station, that maybe take an average over the last couple of years of what the actual tax increase was just with the regular operating budget, and then layer this in?
So you want the so you want the expenses for the budget as a whole? Mm-hmm. So you want that based on a historical average. You want that as an increase over how long? Just
so if we want to show like the next 3 or 4 years, so we can kind of see how you're saying that it's really not going to impact the tax rate all that much. And then by saying that we're only have to take maybe 4 million for, I mean, the project itself is only 16 months, right? So when would we pull the full 18 million?
Over time, we would obviously take it, but we could, you know.
Within a month, a year and a half, the most, right?
I'm not, I mean,
So based on the current schedule, we would be doing construction start September of 2024. So you would take a portion of you take the significant portion of the design fees, and probably the first 3 months of construction would be the pool for that first year. So that is very close to the $4 million number. And then the next 12 months, if you add the 12 plus the 3, you've got 15 of the 16-month schedule. So the bulk of it is going to be in that next year.
Be years down the road. I just want to make sure people understand
It's just 1 year. I
that.
mean, I
Yeah,
don't want
that's
people
fine.
to
I'm
think
just-
that
I'm
we're
just-
gonna
right,
be
right.
like,
So,
this is going to go out for years. It's
Right.
just basically 1 year that
okay,
we're
that's
not going to have the full bond, right?
news to me. So, so you want the expenses over the course of a few years to cover this, correct? And then, I want to reiterate, the main thing that's affecting the balance here of cutting off costs for the taxpayers is the debt service, not the expenses. I can do it. I can generate that, what you're asking. But I just want to reiterate that the debt service is what's making us break even almost, 280-something thousand difference, which is, I mean, I don't want to say it's pennies, but it's in a $50 million budget. That's not a huge amount. That can be chopped up by, again, fund balance or something else. So, but I can create that for you, yes.
Can I ask? So I know you're not a fan of the 3 to 5 year projection, but I think it's very important, from a private citizen, from a council person, I think we owe it to people to tell them what our contractual obligations are over the next 3 to 5 years. We know what they are. It's not going to be hypothetical.
So,
and then let them know if that is X, let's say X is $250 a year, and then we have a $372 a year. Combine the two and say, okay, it's almost $600 or around $600, and just let people vote. I'm not trying to influence people. What I'm trying to do is make sure that they know what the total impact is, because they have budgets themselves.
The reason I stray away from this and why I said so many times to grab the formula for everybody is because I'm sitting on it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different variables in this formula. Expenses and revenue are 2. Actually, the collection rate stays the same. Yeah. Operating expenses and revenue are 2. Well, and if you want to include debt service, I guess, since that's pretty much, we know what we're spending for that. That's 3 out of the 7 variables in this formula. If I was to sit here and say, taxpayers of, the town of North Smithfield, we're going to be going up an average of 5%. And with these contractual obligations that we have one that's coming up. We have the police that's coming up soon, so we don't know what those both are going to be in the next couple of years. They're going to be coming up, I'm pretty sure, before fiscal year 27. So,
which would be good for people to know, right? I
Right.
mean,
but
that's what I'm
they
saying.
could be going up or down. And how am I? My question is, how am I to? Do you want me to use historical data based on the historical averages, based on those particular things to see where they're going?
It's a snapshot. It's a snapshot. We
Okay.
understand that. We
Okay.
won't hold you to the actual decimal point.
I mean,
but
look at historical increases.
and if we know what historically it's been 3.5%, and you know what? It could go to 4.5%. We don't know that. So that's what I'm just trying to get an idea
Understandable.
over the next 3 to 5 years, so that when we tell people this is the impact, it is not just the tax impact relative to this bond. It is conceptually, excuse me, and contractually everything that we know at that time. There will be other things that may come up. We understand that.
Okay.
That's just the way life is. But it's like buying a car. If you know it's, you know, the monthly payment is $500 a month, and you can't afford $500 a month, then you have to scale back, right? So, and I think what Mally Jones was saying is, if we're not to exceed the 4% cap for operating expenses and things that we need on a daily basis, we may have to start sharpening our pencils a
It
little.
doesn't, so with all due respect, it doesn't work like that. The 4% cap doesn't work like that. It's operating expenses plus the debt service, minus the operating revenue, plus abatements, divided by your collection rate. That's your levy. That's your 4%. It has it's not just strictly expenses that we'll be spending on a day-to-day. I will make this, and I'm glad that you guys are saying that it's a snapshot, because it's not going to be 100% accurate, and it's not going to be accurate at fiscal year 27. Because, again, assessments will be...
I think it should be, because that's the year, according to what you're recommending, everything's going to escalate, right? So that would concern me then.
What's that? Not everything. No, just the. I think we have the police. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're saying that the cost could escalate after the first 2 years.
In 27.
In 27, the modified.
So, yeah, that's when negotiations start again.
Right.
And like I said, over the last 5 years, police. And I guess that's one of the larger ones. Police went up by 5.5%.
Okay.
So I can take 5.5%.
Well, those are good numbers to start with.
Yeah.
So
that was in the rough sketch of a 3 to 5 year that I had sent to council a while back. The police, the debt service, a couple other departments. I basically had already provided this, but I'll go back and just recheck all the numbers and make sure everything's correct.
And we understand, and reval will happen again.
Yeah.
We could have values go up again.
Exactly.
We could have the values that went down this time go up. So people that got a lower assessment this time may not be on the happy end of taxation. And what we're saying is we need to tell people this and let them make a decision that's good for them and their family. That's it. That's it. I'm not trying to make it yay or nay, or I hate it, or I love it, or whatever. I'm just saying, give me the facts so I can pass them on to people. They're intelligent enough to make decisions for themselves.
Understood.
Can I ask a question for Tony? Tony, I think the confusion here is, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Talk to us like we're in 5th grade, okay?
It's like an episode of The Office.
All right, and I think that's what's getting confusing here. So I'm going to, just answer me like I'm in 5th grade. So if this passes in November, when is the actual money put in, when does the bond become available?
As soon as, I don't have an exact time frame, but as soon as bond lets us pull on it.
Okay.
I don't have an exact, I haven't pulled a bond as.
All right, and Paul or Jeff, when would we have to write that first check? And what, so it passes in November, and we have the money in our account, so to speak. When do we write that first check?
Arguably, about a month after that.
And how much
we
is that?
started immediately in design, so that would be, we've got about a nine-month design period, so it would be 1/9 of the, how much? Yeah, it'd be a couple $100,000 at most.
All right. So what I'm getting at is...
It's going to be it'll be 1/9 of the fee that applies to design. There's a portion of the fee that goes to construction administration. That wouldn't be part of it.
All right, so what I'm getting at is, so that money then, we could put that money and make 5%.
We can make money off of our money with careful of arbitration, but we can make money off of the money that we pull.
Which would offset the balance, which would offset the cost of the bond for the first 2 years.
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Regardless, so we could, with whatever the money that we make, we could offset it, and say we use 16 million, unlikely, but say we use 16 million, we don't, if we're pulling gradually, we don't take that 2 million.
All right. And then at what point is the bond, all this supposedly this drop off in our debt service, that takes place in 2027?
Start of fiscal year 2027, which is July 1st, 2026.
Okay. And at which time the amount that we're paying would go down.
Correct. That is a difference. That would go down by 1.255 million.
Okay.
And our debt service, if we started the modified, would be 1.325,
All right.
give or take.
So we're
And-
looking at only about a year of the high, this, was it 68 cents?
Not even if we did the modified like our advisor had suggested, we would have a 0.18 increase, and then a 0.17 increase, and then 27. We would, I don't know the number for that, but if our debt is falling off, I would soon be about the same, if not less, a lot less.
Okay.
I can have him generate an extension of that for clarification, but if our debt is staying relatively the same, because right there, that's assuming that we're adding the fiscal year
Okay.
25, 26 on the modified, the bottom one.
All right.
It's showing that we're only going up a little bit, and then we're shooting back down.
Okay. All right. So that's what I wanted to make clear.
Yep.
Formula right here is just showing the bond exclusively. That's
Just,
not
yeah.
operating expenses.
It has
So
nothing to do with, yeah.
if the multi-generational comes online, if,
Well-
the new contracts come online,
Yeah. Well, no offense,
there's
I
all
mean,
these other things
given how
that
long it's
aren't in
taken
this
for
number
this.
that we have to make sure, like maybe there should be, I don't know what that asterisk says, but
Residential and commercial that doesn't talk about tangible.
it maybe should be noted that this is strictly the effect of the police station bond and nothing else
Well,
is tying into this number.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was clear.
Well, it's not really, because it's talking about just the debt service. It's not talking about the regular operational that we talked about before, that some people said, well, that's going to happen regardless. Yes, it is, but it's also going to raise taxes throughout the years, but now we also are adding a bond payment
So-
onto it. So that's what
Yeah,
needs to be
I agree.
understood.
So let me throw another monkey wrench in here. The net assessed values, right? The values of all these houses in the last, let's say, 5 years, they've skyrocketed, right?
No.
If I continuously increase that denominator, that rate goes down, down and down. It doesn't go up. So
Please.
do you want me to make that assumption at the net?
That's the assumption
That-
that's the assumption
Correct.
that PFM made.
I can make the assumption with my 3 to 5 year forecast, the forecast that I create. I can make the assumption that the net assessed values are level where they're at now, but if it's not going to be fair to that number, personifying numbers now, but it's not going to be fair to that number that everything else has a gradual year-over-year increase, but net assessed values is the same. I would have to include that net assessed values based off the historical average. Because if I keep doing that, I mean, think about the percentage year-over-year increase of the values of homes over the last 5 years. They've gone up quite a bit.
Well, I think people.
No matter what, I'll do it. I'm
Yeah,
going to do it no
I
matter
think
what.
people just want to know, okay, look, in the next 5 years, what's the bottom line for me? What's the bottom line?
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. I'll do it.
That's all
I
I
just
want.
want to make these points clear before I get into it, and before people start seeing numbers and they're like, oh, this looks really good, or this looks horrible. So,
Mike, okay? Mike Clifford, 489 Black Plain Road. I've been talking about financial Armageddon that we're heading towards. But after what I just heard over the last 15 minutes, I'm convinced it's going to be 10 times what I envisioned it to be. Because nothing that was said has made any sense whatsoever. First of all, I'll go back to, aside from this and that explanation that we just heard, I'm going to go back to Mr. Yazbek's comment where he said, we had to do a $30 million middle school, and we did it so it was affordable. Well, I don't think it was affordable on the tax rate. And we left nothing in the operating budget, exactly what Mally was talking about, to operate the school. So after we built the new middle school with the industrial arts classes and the foreign language labs and the business language, all those things, those programs all went away. just like Mary was just saying, Mally just said, you're going to have to cut in your operating budget. If you take on debt that's too much to bear, you're going to have, you know, a hamburger helper every night instead of a meal. So Mally made a very valid point, and that's one of the ones that I wanted to make. But it, you know, for him to say that, oh, it was wonderful from then on, that's why the infrastructure of the town decayed. We were too busy paying the $4 million bond payment than to have money to repair anything. That's what cost us to be poor. And, when, you know, and not be able to upkeep things in our infrastructure was we had too much debt. So now we're running out and trying to do the same thing again. And worse yet, we have no 4-year, 3-year, 5-year, there's been no forecasting of the expenses of the operating budget done yet. And I don't know how any of the council people can sit there and say they're comfortable with this going forward without knowing what the true impact is going to be. It's more than the $300 a year for the bond payment. It's going to be another, as Mally said, $300, $600, depending on how high the 4% goes. All right, so I heard Mr. Zielinski at the last meeting make that same comment about, oh, I'm going to stick under the 4%. I'm never going over the 4%. You know, he said, what?
I didn't say that.
You said you would not go over the 4%.
Attempt to keep it.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
if you're gonna say things, say the truth.
I did, Paul.
Say the exact.
Did anybody hear him say
Don't
that?
gavel me, gavel him.
Did anybody hear? Okay. I thought I heard him say he wouldn't go over the 4%. And I thought to myself, how can he make that bold statement and commitment? Then I started thinking about it on the way home, and I said, well, first of all, he doesn't set the budget. You people do.
And I said that.
So you people will be the ones who will recommend going over or not going over the cap of 4%. So what he says, it really, you know, it doesn't have a big impact here. But secondly, that $82 figure that you were talking about before, it's already on, you know, we talk about social media. Yeah, it's on social media. There's a person on the Valley Breeze telling everybody that it's going to be $82 a year in increased taxes. Then he qualifies it with this obscure statement that nobody's going to understand. But they're being led to believe it's $82. And I think it's about just being deceptive to play all these games with the, you know, the bonding opportunities that you're looking at. I've heard you talk about a 5-year projection of expenditures. I haven't seen it. He's mentioned he's done one. I haven't seen it.
Well,
why aren't we getting to see that? And I'd like to see that. If there's one that's done, I'd like to see it. You can't float this thing and issue it and have the voters even voting on this bond without telling us what that budget looks like. I don't know how you're going to stay under 4%. I mean, the school department's budget increased by over $1 million last year, increased $1.3 million, with some of it coming from state aid and some from the town. The other budgets all went up substantially. The salaries in the police department account alone, just the categories that fall into cash salaries, for a couple of $100,000. I think it was $250,000 to $300,000. So those things are going to affect us next year. By the way, the teacher's contract is coming to an end this year. And since we gave the police 3.5%, I think you better count on 3.5% for the teachers, because they're going to see that you set a precedent, you gave one group another 3.5%, and they love to compare themselves to one another. The last time I did a financial impact statement as the chair of the budget committee for a teacher contract, it was over $500,000 a year on an impact in the tax rate that we had to pony up. So how do you stay under 4%? When you've got, you know, the teacher contract coming up, there's, oh, by the way, there's salaries for the school department. Was it, well, I'm trying to think, wait a minute, I forgot which one it was. One of those numbers.
What are we talking about?
Well, the school department salary, the financial impact statement for the teachers, the last one that's on there from 2001 to 2020, 23, 24, shows this year in FY '24, because of the last contract, their budget for salaries is increasing $500,000. Okay? So we're in a pipe dream if we just keep saying, well, this is only going to add this, because you don't know all the other things that are going to be thrown in there. And to say that, oh, well, you know, we got that tangible revenue and our revenue is going to be staying stable, that's mind-boggling to me that they would make statements like that. And Paul, I'm looking directly at you because you used to say all the time that you can't use tangible revenue for an operating budget because it will eventually go away, and then you've set yourself up for a structural deficit. And I think that's what we're doing here. We're setting ourselves up for a big deficit because you're doing it in backwards. You've lost since 2016, National Grid, the biggest taxpayer in the town of tangible property, went from paying us $5.9 million. This year they're paying us $4 million. $1.9 million in tax revenue lost from that one National Grid customer. So you are going to get hit because we got to make that money up. Gary, excuse me, I've got it. Okay, it's not correct. Yep, right, Gary. You told me before, Gary, that I was wrong when I said that the bond payment, when we issued it in 2014, we were issuing it at that time so that the revenue from National Grid that was coming in would cover it. And you kept saying, oh, no, that won't cover it. That's going to be going long before. You were assuming we had a 20-year bond. We had a 10-year bond. So I know what I'm talking about. Every time I forecast something, I stood up at the cafeteria, the auditorium in the high school a couple of years back when I was chair of the budget committee, took a lot of flack from everybody in the room because I was the only one who said the school department is not going to have a deficit. They're going to have a surplus. They ended the year with a surplus. And I'm telling you right now, this is going to be a catastrophe. First of all, if we go back to the 4%, the other thing I want to address is Mr. Yazbek said, you have to decide now what it's going to be and tell the taxpayers now what you're going to do. You've already heard from bond counsel, it's too late for that ship to sail. It's not binding. Whatever you tell us isn't binding. What's in the bond question is binding. If you had used the bond question that Mrs. Alves and Mrs. Hamilton were presenting, which is pick one of the three, renovate new for X number of dollars, renovate new, renovate existing, build new, or neither of the above, you would have been bound to do that. But with this language, we don't know what you're going to do with it. And nobody, God knows, nobody knows what you're going to do with it. Secondly, I want to discuss the, I know this architect has a good reputation, I've heard that all, but I also find it interesting that there was an article in the NRI Now last week actually, about the Gloucester police station being built or renovated. And their architect has told the chief in that community, and it was in the paper, that they're building a new police station or renovating for $8 million. The new police station is going to cost $8 million. And that police station is going to be over 12,000 square feet. It didn't say the exact number, but it's like, we're looking at 1,360 square feet or something. They're building one for $8 million. I'd like to see how that happens, but I don't think, this is chiseled in stone, the best buy we can have. And I'm dying to find out what's going to be in that budget versus what's in this budget to see the difference. But also, in 2018, when Mr. Sakosha gave a presentation to the town council on, what we can do after the MBRTF studied the issue for 2 years, he came back with, he came back saying, well, if you renovate Bushy, it's going to cost you $3.3 million. If you renovate Kendall Dean, it's going to cost you $3.5. You don't have enough money to do both. So they opted to do Kendall Dean. But he also said at that time that a news station, and this is in 2018, would cost between $6 and $7 million. Now he's built, and he is the architect in Gloucester that's now telling him $8 million. So something strange here. But I want to get back to, I don't understand, I guess it's a question for the building committee. When you took over, how many people in here didn't know? I guess that's the question. How many council people and how many MBRTF members and how many town administrators didn't know that the police station had leaks in the roof and the parapet was falling away from the building? Because it's been in every report from since 2014. So did anybody not know that? Show of hands. Everybody knew it, right? So my question is, why, knowing that?
Because I didn't raise my hand doesn't mean I'm agreeing with you, sir.
Oh, okay, okay. Just means you want to say something afterwards to contradict. Okay, Gary. But, you know, so
comment, please.
2015, thanks for interrupting. I want to know from the building committee why, when you only had enough money to do one building, and the Kendall Dean building was vacated in 2016, and you made the decision in 2018 to put the money into this building, which wasn't having a terribly leaking roof and all the other catastrophes, the brickwork wasn't falling apart. Why didn't you do the Bushy School if you only had enough money for one? And secondly, you never tried to do any of the renovations that you were told to do for $900,000. And Paul, you said last week, Mr. Nordstrom, at the last meeting, you said we were directed otherwise. I went back and looked at the videotape of that meeting. You said you were going to, after the bids came in at $2.2 million for Bushy, your position was you were going to revisit that scope of work and try to reduce it again. And the scope of work, by the way, was supposed to be for $900,000, but you issued bid specs for $2.5 million worth of work. And that's why they came in over budget. And Paul Vadney didn't tell the council when they presented those specs to him that they had changed the specs. And they're an advisory committee, so I don't even know how they had the right to do that. And I don't know why the architect listened to him. And I'd still like to sue Mr. Sakosha if he did that without authorization from all the elected officials.
Point of order.
That's coming to the financing. Point of order, nothing. I can say everything I want to say, John. It is the subject. I'm dealing with the financing. I'd rather the architect who changed those bid specs without telling the council that he was doing it, because you're his client. The council is his client. If he did something he wasn't supposed to do, he should be held accountable for it and pay for it. And I think that's how you finance a new building. I'm tired of financing everybody else's mistakes, quote unquote, which I don't think are mistakes at all. And, you know, I've heard that the people in this town last year are kind of like, last year was not a normal year because it was the first year that they were taxed on their new assessed values. And they didn't all go up in the reassessment. The tax assessor had reported to you that 300 properties in town, homes, went down in value. 433 had no change. And 100 went up by greater than 1%. But those 733 homes actually, even with the increased rate, decreased their tax bill. So people are going to be in for a shock this coming year when you issue the next year's tax bill, because they're not going to have the effect of that bumper. And you have been spending a lot of money, but you've also been fortunate that the state revenue has been coming in. And I don't believe it's going to continue to come in the way it did. Now, last week, Mr. Ozowski said that there was no point in looking back, and I think there is a point in looking back because you learn from your mistakes. But then he proceeded to look back and tell us all the wonderful things he did for his term in office. But he did not address what he did do or didn't do for the police station. So I filed an APRA request with the police and the town for a copy of all work orders that were done from 2016 through today. And for the 8 years that they gave me, because they started in 2015, they spent about $100,000 on the building, which comes out to about $12,500 a year. And there was no big charge in there for repairing the roof, and no big charge for, doing anything substantial. This whole paper, this whole 17-page report or whatever it is, has small things like, vial cleaning the cell and cruiser, $125. Cleaning supplies, $137. There's nothing in here that's significant repair to the building. And that's why I say this was an intentional neglect of the building, because you wanted a nice little prop for when you proposed the new one. But the only repair on here was, Kim, what? It doesn't have to be a question. As Mr. Yazbek said, it's my statement. It is a public hearing. A public hearing, I'm sorry. Is Mr. Igliozzi here? Conveniently, no. Okay. All right. So, the only substantial repair...
He's taking over your meeting.
The only... No. John, the ACLU will be here in a second if you stop me. I'm sorry, what? The ACLU will be here in a second if you stop me. They've already gone to Warwick for the same thing. The only repairs in the whole packet of the big bucks of $100,000, $12,000 a year was, like the backup generator needed to be fixed. Okay, that's a repair. But nothing to do with the leaky roof, the bad windows, the asbestos or anything like that. It was all Mickey Mouse stuff. Secondly, I have a question for the architect. Would you highlight the soft costs, please? Can you do that on the slide so everybody gets to see what the soft costs are? Huh?
Bear with me 1 second.
Yep.
I just gotta pull that.
Thank you for coming.
Can you break down the soft cost? Do you have a sheet that shows what
right
that $2.3 million consists of?
I don't have that full breakdown in this presentation.
Is it on the big slide? Can you enlarge the big slide with the sheet?
Oh, what it includes?
Yeah. No, by breakdown, with a breakdown of dollar amounts.
Oh, I don't have the breakdown.
Okay,
in this
I think it's 1.3 million of it, of that 2.3 million. 1.3 million is design architectural fees. What's that?
That's the fees to do the construction documents for the project.
Okay,
And
so
that includes not only the architect, but all of the engineers.
Well, who the engineers work for?
They work for me.
Okay.
They're
so-
not my company, they're consultants.
Yeah, okay. But how much of it is your fee?
Well, that whole number is the fee for all of the team that will work on the project,
Okay,
through all the way through construction administration.
so that's 9.5% of the cost.
Yes.
But at the last meeting, you were asked by the MBRTF if you would negotiate that cost reduction. And you said no, but then when I came to the next meeting, I saw the slide and it said 9% of cost. So did you have a change of heart or have another meeting after that?
I don't have that information in front of me, so I don't know what you're referring to.
Well,
You said it's 9?
okay, well, let me ask you, is 9.5% design fees typical for the industry?
Yes, sir, for police station work it is.
It is? Okay, well.
Other building types have lower percentages, some have higher.
Okay. Well, when we did have Mr. Sakosha do the proposal in 2018, the soft cost for Bushy for design fees was $204,000. And for Kendall Dean, the soft cost for design fees was $268,000. And now the soft costs are this. And I downloaded from the internet this architectural fee schedule, which puts every type of project in a different category. And it has 5 categories. And police station is listed in category 3. And it indicates that if the project is between 16 and 18 million dollars, the design fees should be about 5.7% of the budget for the construction budget. And it also says 18 to 20 million, it should be 5.6%, is what this.
That would be basic services. We actually include more in our services than basic services. Basic services don't include civil engineering. I include that.
Well, what's the civil engineering to be done in addition to the architectural?
All the stormwater drainage, the parking.
The site work?
Yeah, all the site work.
I think that was included in the
That's-
previous one.
That's usually not included in basic services fees.
Well, could you
Data
give
that
us a full, I mean, I know you have the number because you came up with the 1.3. Could you sometime or other ship to us what that actually consists of?
I could come up
Broken
with the scope of work that's included in that,
Broken
sure.
down. And at the last meeting too, I asked, you know, I know it's easy to come up here and show the nice slide of the new building and say, oh, look at, let's compare it to what the current police station is. The current police station, if it was renovated according to the 2016 plans, had a totally different layout with
Yes,
an
sir.
elevator. And they didn't put the elevator come up in the middle of the building, which is extremely costly. They put a small enclosed lobby area on the end of the building so that it wouldn't, they'd have the freedom of laying out the building. But so if you're gonna compare slides, let's look at the slide for the floor plan where the whole entire, the cell area was all renovated in 2016 and reconfigured differently, and it was near the booking area, and it did have, you know, arrestee interview rooms right there. The whole layout changed dramatically. Everything changed. So, you know, it's nice to say, because we don't have that slide in front of us, that, oh, we're comparing it to this current condition. This current condition is not what we would get if we renovated that building. So, you know, and I'm not even opposed to, you know, I'd prefer to renovate, because I think you need to think of the people in the town who can't afford this big increase. But, you know, aside from that, I'd like you to be a little more cautious with spending the money and take a peek at everything. And I don't understand how you can even put this on the ballot and go forward and recommend it down deep in your heart if you don't even know what our 5-year forecast is for the operating budget, because Mally's right on the money. We're going to be going over the 4%, and you're going to be making some serious cuts. So what are we going to do, lay off the police?
Madam President, the request to have the architects change anything within the presentation, I think should come from you, just for the record purposes going forward, just
Right.
suggestion.
He's making changes.
Anyone else?
Thank you, God. Thank you, God.
I really came just to listen tonight, but, you know, I refuse to be part of any kind of an answer that is, or a question that is, do you still beat your wife, sir? Please don't do that to us. That is just, it's just, you know, why are we here? It amazes me that this town has been able to get to the point that it's at. How do we ever get to have the resources that we have, the facilities that we have, without, you know, these voluminous plans and, you know, I mean, 5-year. Mr. Finance Director, I sympathize with your plight and recognize the indeterminate differential equation that you're trying to solve. This is not, in the eyes of good planning, it's a wild guess. And we're going to put it forth as fact? Sorry. Mr. Yazbek was right. We need a police station. And, you know, as the administrator has been said multiple times, in my years as the administrator from 16 to 20, I ended many of my communications with a statement that said, no organization got to great by doing good enough. We're just looking, in this circumstance, from the voice of some people here, I don't think it's the many, but some people that are here, Just do good enough. The police will be happy. Why are we here? We're here because we went through this same process in 2012 to 2014, where we didn't look at our opportunity or our ability to pay a bill in a dynamic circumstance. We looked at it in a static circumstance. By one recommendation, you can only spend $12 million because that's the debt limit that we have. Baloney. Baloney. What was happening there is the same thing that's happening here. We're uber focused again on tax rate without considering anything in the way of growth. And growth is the differentiator in so much of this. And we got forced into a circumstance where 3 proposals were made. I voted for 2 out of the 3. I voted for the police station, believe it or not. It was the education side that I didn't like because I didn't think we should be making our elementary school the biggest school in our district, but we did it. But I supported that construction process at every point. I was in the construction trailer. I made sure the payments were made on time. I followed every detail because that's what the people decided. Our infrastructure in the town, well, I'll stay back at that $12 million. 3 bonds were passed. Not one of them was adequately funded. Not one. It was a ruse. Heaped on us on the mantra that we can only afford to spend $12 million. Baloney. We haven't built the police station yet. It would have been very easy to do some of the same kind of thinking that PFM has offered to us, and they did offer to me. That we could have spaced those projects and did them appropriately. Would it have affected the tax rate? Yes, it would have. But today, we'd have a police station built of some form. And our chief wouldn't be wrestling with the circumstance that he is and having to advertise again and again and again and again to get new personnel. You know, I mean, the school bond, I mean, the original budget, 4.3, is that what it was? It cost over $6 million. It was $2 million that came out of the school department's fund balance, their reserve, I should say, as it's called there. If it wasn't for the school department's willingness to spend that, we wouldn't have the school today either. The PBIC came to this group in November, came to the council in November of 2016 and said, hold on the police station, build this building as best you possibly can, make it a 50-year building, 40-year building, I think was the term, and we'll see what's left to maybe make the police station a 10-year building. Because, yes, there was identification that the brick was falling away from the building. From 16 to 20, we re-roofed the memorial building. Go back and look at the pictures of from prior to 2016 of what that building looked like on the outside. It was disgusting. The paint was peeling in every corner. The internal gutters were leaking and potentially starting to rot. We had a gutter on the chimney inside the building conducting water to a bucket. We re-roofed the building, we repainted the building. Did it cost money? Yes. It cost almost $50,000 to repaint that building. But we did it. We fixed our infrastructure from 16 to 20. And there were no complaints of water leaking into the police station. Not one. What we had, obviously, was water that was getting between the brick and the block, and that was causing the facade to fall away. Was that known? Yes, it was known. That's a capital project. We had an imminent action to do something about that building. So you want the town administrator to step in and say, I'm going to replace all the brick on the front of the building while you try to decide what you're going to do with the building in general. Really. I'm sorry, folks. This is, you know, we stumbled through a circumstance with 3 bonds. You know, I'll go back to infrastructure. We are repaving roads today, not by bonding it and paying for 8 miles but only getting 7 because we bonded it. We're doing it by doing 2 miles, you know, setting up a budget that can do 2 miles a year, every year. That's the only way to stay ahead of or catch up and stay ahead of the road resurfacing need. We added sewer length. We added water length. We replaced, I think, every one of our frontline fire trucks. We replaced the radios. I was at a meeting early on. We had, police radios, police radios were going, and you could understand what they said. Fire department was sitting right next to us, and you couldn't understand a single word. We made substantial investments in infrastructure from 16 to 20, and this circumstance is suggesting that the reason that we're in this position with the police station today is because of lack of maintenance is ridiculous. What is true is that we've been at a point of indecision, and I think Mr. Yazbek was absolutely right in saying that, folks, you are the council. You are the leaders. What the wording is in the bond is one thing. Mr. Clifford is right. That cannot be changed. But each of you can say what you recommend the town to do. And I believe, as the town's leadership, you should be saying what you recommend the town to do. And in my view, anything less than construction of the new building with resources that are fully qualified and prepared to give us a building within a budget that works and meets the need going forward. We don't need a 10-year building. We need a 50-year building, as the architect has recommended. We can take snippets of things. This how much moved, or we lost some revenue from National Grid on the tangible side. Yes, we switched a bunch of it to the commercial side. It's at a lower rate, but it's permanent. It's not sinking as it was when it was part of the tangible. Would I wish that had, in some ways, certainly during my term, it didn't make things fun. We lost a lot of money each year. But in addition to the town's physical infrastructure, despite all of that, we also made investment in the town's fiscal infrastructure. We have a reserve today that, yes, the finance director probably could lean on that for some withdrawal and still remain within the recommendation that's in the council-established ordinance. It says it is supposed to be between 12 and 16. I don't recall. Yeah, I think it's between 12 and 16% of our budget. We invested. We channeled money in the water and sewer accounts to the same thing, that we established reserves. We rebuilt every portion of or reinforced every portion of our infrastructure, both physical and fiscal. North Smithfield is a very lucky community. I've looked at because of the conversations about who can afford things, go through the state information. We sit right in the middle in terms of average income on a family basis, or any way you want to break it down. We have capacity as individuals, and that's why this town has gotten to the point that it is. I defy anyone to say that we can't do things. It becomes a circumstance of when we do them. Failing to do a police station is putting this community at risk. Mr. Yazbek was right. At risk. Does it mean that we maybe can't build a senior center next year? Yeah, maybe it does. I'm willing to say that, because I will say to anyone, build a police station first. Make sure that we have the critical infrastructure first, and the support infrastructure can come later. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Don't you let him up again? Oh, come on, this isn't a
Mike.
debate.
I just want to say one thing. I want to get it in the record, that the numbers that I quoted from National Grid and the tangible depreciation came directly from the town. I was provided from the town the tax bills from National Grid from 2006 to 2023. So my numbers were accurate. They came from the town.
Okay. Anyone else?
Get him away from me.
Mike Rapko, 25 Old Greenville Road. It's unfortunate Mr. Azovsky reprimanded me for talking about the past, that we should be moving forward. And what does he do? He wastes 10 or 15 minutes. what we're here tonight is to figure out how to go forward and how to make the taxpayer feel comfortable. We chased out half the audience with this bickering back and forth. Half the audience is gone. I'm uncomfortable with a special election that you're not going to get the whole town to vote. That's going to be a big issue. We're putting $18 million on the table with a special election, and how many voters are going to come out? The second issue, there's a lot of confusion in the language of the bond. And Mr. Yazbek brought it up, that the council should, tell us ahead of time. The other option, instead of the council telling us ahead of time what they think, is maybe they should just say, this is not the opportune time to go with this bond. You can't change the bond, it's stuck. The voters have to say no. So maybe we should be thinking about, if the voters say no, is the council prepared within the next 90 days or 120 days to come up with a plan to use this architectural firm to come up with a plan that we all feel comfortable as residents, whether it's increases in taxes or other things that we're running into. When you open up your electric bill today, October 1st or yesterday, there's a $30 a month increase in your bill on the supply side for the next 6 months. So there's a lot of little hidden things happening on the side, whether it's the new electric service bills for $30 a month for 6 months, whether it's the heating oil, whether it's food prices. There's a lot of things that are scaring the taxpayer. So when you throw $18 million on the table and say, it's only $18 million, it'll only cost you $200 or $300 a month, that's going to scare people. So I don't know what the solution is, but maybe the voters are going to have to say no, and then tell the council, come back in 90 days, figure it out, work with the architect, come up with a good financial plan, a 3 or 5 year forecast. I don't think we have time in the next 30 days to come up with a really good forecast for the next 3 to 5 years. I don't think it's going to happen. There's no way you're going to pull it out. So the question is, we have a window, a 30-day window, and I think it's closing quickly, so I'm going to vote no. I'm not comfortable with what's going on. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I would just like to add a few things. I've been in the construction business for over 45 years. We build based on facts, cost, and need. We build based on facts, not fiction. Renovating this old building for a police department is fiction, and it's a disservice to this community. You will still only have a police department. You will never have a true police station. It can never be a state-of-the-art police station. Structurally, that building is stressed. It's beyond its useful life. It's inadequate and not a viable option. This committee is here for a new police station. That's not an option for us. We're not here for renovation. The general rule of thumb in construction is if the cost to renovate a building exceeds 2/3 the cost of a new building, it's a bad investment. This is a bad investment for the town to renovate that building. $18 million today is a bargain. If you go and renovate that building, I promise you, within 20 years, you're going to build a new police station at a cost of over $30 million to the taxpayer. People deserve to be protected. They are not adequately protected now, and you won't be with a renovation. In 2020 through 2022, construction costs escalated at 45%. Going forward, 2023, 2024, construction costs are estimated to escalate at only 4 to 5%. This is a good time to build this facility, build a new facility now. The people of this community deserve it. As far as the contingencies, Rebecca, you showed that there was 855,000. Is there more than that? Yeah.
No, that should be it should be inclusive of all of the contingencies. Are you asking if that's varied?
I thought it was higher.
if it was higher overall.
Yeah.
Don't believe so, but I will verify that.
All right, nonetheless, I can tell you in constructing a new building like this, we're not likely to utilize a lot of the contingency. But in renovating this building, you'll use it all, and then some. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'd like to say something. I've told you from day one, we could not pay for these volunteers and their expertise. Engineers. We have it all. Businessmen. They've spent so long because it was a fight they had to win, because it's a right thing. And let me tell you, there's a few times I just prayed they'd come back, because I don't know how they do it. They're competent. This is their field. This is their town. And for some, we're here because North Smithfield never fixed things. You go back, we got the roads. It's nice to keep things down, not while your town's falling apart around you. We waited too long to start. And I thank you for your patience, for your expertise, and for not walking out. Thank you.
May I ask a question? Mr. Chamberlain, this may seem off the topic, but I'm getting to it. What was the cost, the total cost of the construction of Topgolf?
It was about $40 million.
And Mr. Chamberlain oversaw the construction of that project, $40 million project. So when he speaks, he knows what he's talking about, and this is what he does for a living. The other question I had for the board was, Mr. Vadney, when since 2016, has there ever been a time? Actually, the chief could answer this as well. Has there ever been a time since 2016 that anybody has come before the council saying that the roof is leaking and nothing was done about it? Has that ever happened?
No.
No.
There was an active leak in the roof approximately 6 weeks ago. I held back on repairing the roof because we were going through the renovation, not the renovation, but the repair of the front, and roofing was part of that. But as I said in a meeting about 6 months ago, it's not unordinary for someone that has a home to patch the roof so the leak doesn't go into the house, but then plan further down to replace the whole roof.
Mm-hmm.
So we made that repair on Friday. It does not leak anymore, and it's a temporary repair. So there's no leak at this time, and it was repaired.
Okay, the reason I asked is because I was accused of knowing that the roof was leaking since 2016 and did nothing about it. But obviously, that's not the case. Am I correct?
We weren't on the council in 2000. We were elected in 2016. We weren't even there.
We were aware there were roof issues. The task force brought them to the council, as we stated at the last meeting. Council went in a different direction on a number of occasions. Everyone was aware the roof has issues. The roof was not leaking the way it was leaking in the last rainstorm. This is a new issue. Could come from any number of issues. It could be from all of the guys that are in there looking to do work on the building, walking on the roof and creating an issue because the roof has already been compromised. We believe it's a flashing issue that's up there, and that's where the roof is failing right now in general, which is part of the immediate repairs that are ongoing right now. Tecton has started, not Tecton, Dubon has started last week. They set the building up with a negative draft to take care of the asbestos abatement and whatnot. So that's ongoing. So has the roof been an issue? The roof's been an issue since 2010, at least, if not longer. the roof has been an issue, people have known about it. But it's never been leaking like it has been, and it was never an issue of, oh, the roof is leaking, we need to fix it, and no one's done anything about it. That's never been an issue.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
May I? The article you were talking about with the Gloucester Police Station, there are no architectural drawings. It was the chief talking to a builder.
No, excuse me, I spoke to the chief myself. I called him after I read the article. He was working with Sakosha Associates, and that figure was given to him based on Mr. Sakosha gave him that figure. $8 million. Now, they haven't done design plans yet or anything like that, and they're still working on it. But I spoke to the chief, and it included all the Sally Port interior and the processing room for vehicles, garage interior, and the three cells, and, you know, it's Sakosha that recommended told him it estimated at $8 million at this point.
And this is the same architect you have issues with?
Yeah, this is the same architect, I believe, was told to do some things that he shouldn't have done. That's right. And I think as soon as we sue him, he'll tell us all who did it and who told him to do it.
Anyone else have any other questions?
I just have one idea.
Can you get up and you have to state your name?
Okay. It'll be one sentence.
What'd you say?
I'll be there in 1 second. My name is Ann Cleary, 19 Silver Pines Boulevard. Let somebody win Powerball tonight, and we'll get all our problems over. That's it.
Thank you.
I love it.
Or hit a
We'll
break
leave on a
or
light note.
Oh, no more.
Mike Rapko, 25 Old Greenville Road. Just to rebut what was just said about this leaking roof, when I was on the PBIC, I specifically told some of the members that are still on this council today that rubber roof was causing a problem and you had to remount it into the brickwork. I have a flat roof, and my contractor said you've got to make sure that rubber is embedded properly into the brickwork, and it wasn't done. It was causing all kinds of problems. So the council was told you need to fix that roof, and things have gotten worse over the last 7 years. So this is not something new. This has been around a long time, and that's what upsets me about this building committee and some members of the council. You knew something was wrong, but you didn't fix it. And now I'm going to give you $18 million and say, go spend the money and build me a new building or renovate, and I'm going to trust you. That's the problem I have. You were told, and you did nothing about it. Thank you.
Did you say the roof was leaking to somebody?
Yeah,
Did you
I
say it
told
was
you
leaking?
personally in front of the council.
You told me it was leaking?
Yeah, because, yeah, I did, because
Never happened?
when you disbanded us, I was in front of that council, and I told you that roof had to be fixed.
Did you say it was leaking?
And the brickwork. What do you mean? When I tell you that rubber roof has to be fixed, what does that mean? Does
Mike.
that mean, what does that mean when you have a rubber roof and there's a problem and it's not mounted properly in the brickwork? It's going to cause problems.
You need to understand, it's not a rubber roof on that building.
So what is it, asphalt?
Bottom line, it's not a rubber roof on that.
What is it,
you're
asphalt?
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, I gotta see anyone else. Anyone else want to speak? All set? We have a motion to adjourn.
Well, just before you do, just a simple comment. That PowerPoint that we saw tonight will get sent to you, Madam President, to the administrator, to the town clerk, to get posted on the town's website. They were all factual information. It's not our opinion. It's all factual information, either from PFM or from Tecton doing their study. So you will get that later tonight, so it can be put up in the morning, sometime during the day or whatever. So just be aware, it's coming. The due information will be up there.
Can we make a motion to adjourn now?
Well, we have other business that we have to do.
Madam President, question. So we'll have two iterations of presentation, the first one and now the second one. I'm going to suggest we leave them both up. There was a difference of 3 slides that I could track in this new presentation. So some of the information, I'm not saying it's altered, but I'm gonna leave the original one up and I'll put the new one up in the first place.
Yeah, I
This,
think,
this one coming in this evening.
yeah, there were more than 3 new slides, so
Three
yeah,
slides,
if
right?
we
Is that
can-
correct from what I?
No,
There was
more
more
than
than 3,
that, yeah.
but
Well, what I,
you're
what
right,
I
yeah.
memorize, what I
Yeah.
from memory.
if we can just date them. Can you just date them on the website so everyone knows which?
Yeah, one from
No, I
September
think-
20th, one from October 2nd.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the date, yes, absolutely. And,
Okay.
as I've asked Tecton earlier, if they could paginate it, would be great. Thank you.
Can we adjourn?
We got other stuff that we gotta do.
We
but
can
you
adjourn now?
Yes.
All right, can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Thank you all.